Well, hello there, everyone. It is Kristi, and we are into the second part of the discussions we're having in terms of responses to our reasonable questions video. Last night we had Steve Shives, we had Demotivator Opinion and Michael Rowlands on, well, along with some guests. And tonight we have Kristiosity of Kristiosity Channel, or Kristiosity Channel here, and Kevin Logan. We're going to be joined, we think, in about 45 minutes by Tom, who also made a contribution. But I don't really need to say too much. If you guys are watching this video, it's probably because you're following the interactions or the drama, however you want to phrase it. So why don't I hand it over to the person whose questions we're going to be focusing on tonight, Kristiosity.
Hello. So I'm going to be doing two of my questions today and then another one at another time. The first question that I had, it's not sort of a question that you would argue against necessarily. So it was, would you come on and be willing to put aside differences and work with, people for men's issues, men's suicide, male addiction rates, male abuse? And I got a very overwhelmingly positive response, I think. A lot of people, Shoe on Head said that she would do it. Infidel Emma, just many people came on. Max Durat, I can't even remember off the top of my head how many people. Also, people have been getting a hold of me at Twitter, and some people on our side of the fence were also interested in sort of an aisle-reaching group. So what I've done right now, and I will put it live and put the link in the description of your video, or I'll ask you to do that, Kristi, rather, is I've set up a group I called Against the Odds, YouTubers who want to work together to help men. And the first order of business, I think, from my point of view, is to sort of narrow down our focus. So I've put up a poll on whether we would rather work on suicide and depression, whether we would work on abuse, on, and now I'm blanking, addiction. Is that the one I forgot? Yeah, addiction. And I did want to talk a little bit about some of the concerns that people had popped in. First of all, I'm going to make it public. I want as many people to join up and join in as on either side of the aisle or right in the middle. As long as you're a person who feels like you can work with other people, you can put aside differences in order to further a common goal, a positive goal, then great, you're welcome. The minute somebody comes in and starts grandstanding, starts, trying to derail, I'm going to give them one warning and they're going to be gone, because I did this sort of thing for a living. I don't have, it's not like on YouTube. When you have a goal, and you accomplish it. Like, that's what I was paid to do. I was paid to play games with people, endlessly on Facebook. So, but provided that you're the sort of person that's like, no, I want to do good things in this world. I want to use my platform for positive changes, then great. You're more than welcome. And I think it'll be a really great opportunity for people to sort of meet each other in a neutral space, as well as to really get something real world impact accomplished. So that's the goal. Now, I talked a little about some of the concerns. Some people didn't understand what I meant when I said that some of the things that you would do to work towards this goal aren't necessarily gendered. And they felt that meant I was saying that these problems didn't have gendered components, and that is not the case. Some of the things that you can do for them, obviously, we're not going to just solve male addiction. Like, it would be really nice if we thought we could do that, but that seems like an unlikely thing to do, right? But what we could do is we can pick a focus and work on an aspect that is not, likely to get feminists and anti-feminists at each other's throats. So things that I see from my background, where I see addiction, for instance, the needs that are there, at least in the United States, I see things like the need for substance abuse programs and treatment centers um, that are more widely available. I see that there's a need for education on what addiction is and what the treatments that are available. I see that our current laws and the way that they are structured, the way that they are implemented, fuck those laws, fuck our drug laws. I mean, I can't even say it strongly enough. Our our criminal legal drug war is just a travesty, in my opinion. Uh, People with addictions need information. They need help with children. When a lot of the people that I knew who came into a treatment center is like, yeah, I mean, of course, I would love to spend a lot of time going through treatment, but I have children that I'm caring for. I can't just leave them alone. So, there's just a number of different places where you can look and say, well, what could we do? What would be useful? As YouTubers, maybe our biggest option for being useful is to involve ourselves in a charity that's already there. Or perhaps there is just getting out education, getting out really evidence-based information to the public about addiction, which is sorely needed. So I just think there's a lot of different avenues that you can go to that you don't even have to touch sort of the more tricky minefield areas. So
Yeah, I think actually this group is a really interesting and potentially quite important thing, because it's a point, to pick up on something you said there, that I've been making for a while, that there are issues like, I think, male suicide, because no one benefits from male suicide. And
mm,
so that surely is an issue where we can come together. And if we can create a space like this Facebook group, where if we set aside our nonsense, like I will not be going in there with my anti-MRA rhetoric. I'm just going to leave it at the door. Whatever comes of that group comes of it. And but not to say that you then have to, completely forget about it outside of that group. But
right,
in that group, set aside that kind of hostile thing and come together and work on something which I think is for the benefit of everybody.
right. Male suicide that is probably the thorniest issue. Um, but definitely there are some places there that we could sort of leverage something to. I think just giving people information, say, on warning signs for suicide, on what we know. And we know it's a little bit different for men and women, even what the warning flags are. They might be a little differently. So defining depression and defining symptoms of depression and talking about how you can go and seek help. Um, all of those things are out there. All of those things they need to be focused on more. They need to be done more. Um, Certainly, several times I worked with men who were suicidal, and they're they're all about the stiff upper lip and right until the whole thing falls apart. Like women, you sort of see this progression. This is just from my experience now. I'm not, um, but women, you can see them becoming sadder. You can see them sort of talking about certain things. But men, it's like, nope, everything's great. Everything's fine, fine, great. And then one day they're coming in and they're saying, no, I'm going to shoot myself. No, I am. Like, I have it ready. It's like, if you don't help me now, today, I mean, we've been on the phone, the place where I worked, we were on the phone with the police saying, you have got to get to this guy's house because that's it. Um, and those are the better interventions. Those are the ones that actually you catch them in time. Very frequently you don't, because there is no reaching out for help. There is no putting yourself out there and just saying, I need help. I need help now. This isn't okay where I'm at. So, it's a tricky one, but obviously any suicide, it devastates families. It devastates. I had a friend who his father committed suicide when he was a teenager. It's incredibly devastating to communities. It is an enormous health, public health disaster out there. So that's kind of my spiel. I don't want to.
Oh, if I could jump in on that. Well, first, about the group itself, how is it a Facebook group, or do you want to plug it a little bit more and yeah, how people can join and where it's located? Because I think I missed that, or maybe you didn't specify.
It is a Facebook group, and I put that out there because it seemed like the easiest way to get a large group of people on social media sort of collected together. Um, but if that's an issue, I'm obviously willing to look at that, and we could do some sort of something different.
I think it's a good
But
plan.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah, don't want to interrupt you.
So yes, it's a Facebook group called Against the Odds, YouTubers working together for men. And it is, I will give you the link, Kristi, so that you can put it in the description, and I'll put it also on my channel. I'll have this whole sort of segment ready to go and put it down. And yeah, anybody can sort of come in. They can I'm on Facebook under Christiosity channel. You can message me through Twitter. Any way that you need to get a hold of me, you can message me on my YouTube channel or on the comment section of the videos. And I keep an eye on all those sorts of things. So I will keep a lookout for you one way or another. If you want to be involved, I'll get you aboard, or if you want to be involved in a group in sort of a good faith way, I will get you there.
Yeah, and I would just say that I would join that group because probably despite the image that is presented or people have of me, I am, my 20% ally is not my, sorry for the background noise, 80% enemy. I think that, there are times where we can come together, and the fact that groups can come together on issues makes it more powerful, not less powerful. So that would be something that I'd be interested in, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for intervention in state legislative debates,
Mm-hmm.
and also trying to spread around information that comes out in news sources. And I would hope that one of the things that comes out, sorry, my street is a very narrow street with a lot of life in it, so I don't know if you hear the children in the
There's a
background.
lot of noisy German children around.
I'm having a very good time at 10 o'clock at night on USB, having a brilliant time. But yeah, the things that you're talking about, when people ask about the issues of toxic masculinity and healthy masculinity, I think that this is a time where we can put those principles into action by evaluating, like you said, the stiff upper lip, the way that men are socialized to repress their emotions and appear stoic.
Right.
And realizing that that's just, I hate to say it, it's a social construct. It's something that's been with us, in honor cultures and shame cultures or whatever else the kind of things are. This notion of men being stoic and being strong and self-sacrificing. And that was really important when people lived in Sparta and people had, the Goths to deal with, or the Goths dealing with the Romans. But we're living in the 21st century now. So we need a masculinity that represents our moral growth as well as our humanism, the growth in our humanism.
Mm.
So, that's a good place to have those discussions about, people often get uncomfortable when men cry. And if men don't
Yeah.
feel that they can cry without making other people uncomfortable, obviously that's a social barrier that we as women don't face. That's a sort of female privilege, if you want to say. We are much more
Yeah.
free to express our emotions. And so how do we break down barriers so that we create spaces where men feel comfortable? We create people who have the attitude that a man who is crying is a man who's expressing his emotions in a very healthy way that he needs to, and we need to be there and support him, and do what we can for him, just like we would with a friend who was a woman.
I would say that's very much a similar point to male abuse, where uh, men just do not come forward when they're being abused in many cases, because they just don't feel like they can admit to it. Um, Sometimes I think, sometimes my understanding is they don't even feel like they can name it for what it is, you know. Like, no, no, it's because of the whole idea. And I hear it. I hear these things when I'm in my real life. I don't know about you. The people that will say things like men can't be raped or men can't be abused, that's silly. Those are always men to me. I don't hear it a lot from women sort of saying that. That's just my personal experience. Excuse me, my personal experience. I don't know what you guys have found, but it's just this sort of, you get your whole hackles up and sort of feeling like, no, 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 men men couldn't, that could not happen to a man because men are bigger and they're stronger and they're not like that. And so
Yeah, it's part of rape culture that I think the reticence of those on the other side to accept rape culture do a disservice to men,
mm,
because part of rape apologetics is involved in things like when a young, a 12-year-old boy is essentially raped by, say, a 35-year-old female teacher. Now that's rape. But to
mm,
say, oh, he should have enjoyed it, or this is every boy's
right,
dream, or whatever, is absolutely fucking deplorable.
mm,
And like I said, the reticence of people on the other side to accept that that's even a thing does a disservice to men, as well as obviously doing a huge disservice to women in general. And surely that's another area upon which, can we not reach some sort of fucking common ground here? It seems so obvious.
I hope so. I mean, and even if it means that we don't necessarily tackle some of the underlying things, sort of let them be. Because I know there are some people that as soon as they hear the phrase toxic masculinity, it's going to be, forget this, they're out of there. And I've said to these people, I said, toxic masculinity was not originally, is my understanding, a um, a feminist idea. It was a male psychologist or psychiatrist, I'm not 100% sure, who was working in a prison with men. And he was looking at these men who were having all these sort of, they were very violent, obviously, and sort of their attitudes about what a real man was like was causing them a great deal of problems, especially you could see how that would be true in a prison situation. So he was sort of the one who sort of got this whole idea that if you feel like being a man means you're always tough, you're always in control, you're always ready to do, to throw down with somebody. And whenever you're challenged, you can't take a challenge to your masculinity, um, and just let that go. You can see how that sort of thing could cause a lot of problems in a person who maybe isn't perfectly stable to begin with.
Yeah. Well,
So,
having mentioned prison, and the concept of people not accepting rape culture as a thing, I think
mm,
this is the point at which I have a tiny little poke at Kristi for a slight hiccup she made. The reason that I wasn't involved in the video itself, was because I'd put together a video of things on my channel as unlisted that Kristi, I think, initially downloaded and lost, and then I made a mistake by deleting it, so I wasn't in the video. But one of my questions was going to be about meeting people halfway on the basis of rape culture by accepting that, at the very least, the rape culture which exists in prison is something that I think everyone can agree on, surely. It's a
mm,
widespread, wide known thing. So why is it that we can't at least meet on that and say that's rape culture? Why is giving into that point somehow losing, or it's, again, I think that in of itself is a certain type of toxic masculinity, that just accepting that you were wrong on one point means that your entire thing falls down or something, and it's very strange. I don't know why they do that.
Can
mm,
I? Well, first, yes, there was a miscommunication that, yeah, you had had the video and put it up, and then I went on traveling around, and then when I went looking for it, it was already gone because I hadn't downloaded it immediately, because I was super busy and I didn't tell you that. So yes, and maybe I can do an addendum where I just pull out the question you just posed and stick it on there as Kevin's addendum question to the video.
We
But
can
on the
do.
topic of rape culture, I watched Garrett and Tim talked to Armored Skeptic and Chew on Head. And I haven't finished it, but I did get through about the first hour of it. And one of the things that came up was the issue of rape culture. And they were of the opinion that you can't really compare. Well, they talked about gun culture, which I think is it's a culture comparison, but the difference between a gun culture and rape culture is that guns exist, that they're physical objects that we fetishize in a sort of, if you want to put it that way. But when it comes to rape, it's almost the opposite. It's the ignoring of the issue that creates culture, and it's the ignoring of the rape kits. It's the ignoring of women who come in to report. It's the victim blaming by not talking about issues of intoxication and consent. And saying that women changed their mind when really they weren't in a position to give consent when they were intoxicated. So the different, and of course it's always easier to do these things in hindsight, but I wanted to bring that up because the cultural pressures around rape exist in the same way in prison, and that people don't want to look at it, or actually even more than that, it's the only kind of rape that you can laugh at and mock. And when we were talking about this coming up, as a kind of growing up until I got more exposed to feminism and the idea of gendered norms and how we get trapped in them, the only kind of male rape I would have been aware of would have been prison rape. The only time that men could get raped would be in prison. That would be the way that I would associate it when I was 17. So yeah, I mean, we do need to talk about how these things like rape culture exist in prison, and we've most culturally seen with men, but any kind of sexual abuse in prisons it's a reflection on us as citizens, that we're unable to take care of our fellow citizens and protect them when the punishment is they're going to prison. They don't also go to prison to get sexually assaulted. That's like something we would associate with a dictatorship or some kind of tyranny.
Right.
And so we need to own those crimes as our not paying enough attention and take care of it, because who knows, maybe someday we'll be behind bars for some weird reason, an accident, whatever, but we don't want that treatment for ourselves. So why would we tolerate it for anyone else? But, so that's kind of what I wanted to bring in, but also the importance of understanding the role of rape culture in perpetuating male victims not coming forward, and also people not knowing how to handle it when a male victim comes forward.
Right. So yeah, as far as my little group is concerned, I just want to say that you don't have to necessarily endorse the concept of rape culture or toxic masculinity or any of these other sort of higher level concepts in order to join in and say, because it's going to be sort of, it's going to be democratic. With the exception of me, I'm the absolute dictator of people who poison my little well are getting the heck out. But with the exception of that, it's going to be whatever we make it as a group.
Yeah, I was actually just about to interject with that same thought, that although we're discussing these, like you say, slightly higher, more diffuse aspects of gender politics, or whatever, I don't think that group necessarily has to go down that line at all. I think we stick to much more neutral, broad aims and goals.
Right.
Well, I think that the way that it connects, if I can, take this down to the practical level, is when it comes to legislation that talks about dealing with men who face homelessness, then understanding the barriers that men face, or with suicide reporting or addiction issues, and being aware of those gendered problems make the policy solutions better tailored and more effective. So, we don't have to have those kinds of, obviously the group isn't going to be discussing, notions of, so it might come up practically, but the point of it would be to increase information, I would assume, and also to try to support legislation that moves funding in the right direction, support services in the right direction, and also public attitudes in the right direction.
Um, if I had like a pie in the sky sort of idea, I would love to see uh, force to penetrate to be added to rape, as well as right now, most rape laws that I know of um, don't really include that.
Yeah, in Britain, there's been something of a push, which I've been very tangentially involved in, or in a very small way involved in, to try and change the British law to include forced to envelop,
Mm,
forced development, forced to penetrate.
mm,
But sadly, unfortunately, we got to the, was it 10,000 or whatever it requires for an official government response, and the government basically said, "We're not changing anything," so we've started again. Because I mean, that's
mm.
ultimately, there's nothing else you can do. I don't think.
Right,
Yeah, and I would support that too because rape is rape is rape.
right.
Yeah, exactly. I think if there's one thing that I would hope everyone would be able to accept, outside of possibly psychopaths, I suppose, is that it doesn't matter who's doing the raping; they're wrong.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about, being forced to do or having something either forced to do something that you don't want to be doing or having something happen that you don't want. It's all about, I mean, that's where the actual sexual assault comes in. That's the point of it. So it's really about the consent or the lack of consent. But I'm not getting on that tangent because somebody will.
Yes, at a
That's
later time.
um,
Did you want to go to the next one, or I was also going to ask how many videos do you want to tell people, like the number of videos you watched and how you did your research in preparation for this too, because there was some feedback on like how people were doing it in the last video. So I wanted to just have let you have a chance to tell people kind of what you did to prepare for this.
I watched a great many. I watched. Oh my goodness, I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head how many I watched. Um, some of which were quite good. I liked Infidel Emma's. I think I probably already talked about her. I lived Positive Improvements. There is a YouTuber. I think her name is Jeans, or it's with a G. It's either Jeans or Gleans. That can't be right. Anyway, um, Gines. I think hers was excellent. There was, let's see, Vengeful Scarecrow, Max Durat. I watched Chris Ray Guns, Armored Skeptics, Shoe on Heads, TJ Kirks. I watched the Kraut and Cheese streams. I watched just enormous numbers of these things to the point where it became like it wasn't even processing anymore. So I had to sort of stop because it was like, no, I've heard the same answers to the same questions too many times, and I'm just like blah. So
Do you remember off the top of your head like what were some of the common responses that kept appearing and your reactions to them?
on my questions or on questions in general?
Well, and your questions, obviously, but if there were some other ones that stuck out to you, we've got a little time while we wait for Tom, so I'd be interested in hearing it.
Um, I think being that the one janitors came up a lot was first. That's one that, uh, and this is, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to stay very positive, and there were quite a few. There was some real reason to be positive in some of these answers. But one thing that really surprised me is how many people do not see themselves as being. If you remember, the first question was the one janitor saying, when you sort of react very hyperbolically or very, with this sort of exaggerated hysteria to people that you're complaining about being hyperbolic and exaggerated and hysterical, that seems a little ironic to me. And a lot of people were saying, oh, we don't do that. That, like, we're either joking, or if you think we're doing that, we're probably just joking, or we just don't do that. I don't see that. And that struck me as very strange because from our point of view, we see that very frequently. um, I don't know if that's something anybody wants to jump in on, but
Well, yeah,
just
to build on that a little bit, that's something that Tim said as well, that he watched Armor Skeptic's response, and that when Tim's question came up about being called a cock or a mangina or being there you questioning male sexuality, he just had no idea what Tim was talking about. And Tim
mm,
realized that that's not his lived experience. He doesn't know what it's like to have comments that just rain down on you, calling you a cock or a mangina or questioning, oh, that you're a virgin,
mm,
like all the time, every day, as Tim, or whenever he puts up a video. It's more, some videos more than others. So yeah, people's lived experiences, if they don't kind of understand where we're coming from, they haven't. I don't think that side has really walked too much in our comment sections from our perspective, but
Mm.
also, yeah, the idea that you can be. This is something again that was brought up in the Hangout with Garrett and Demotivate Opinion and Armored Skeptic. She one had said that she has a persona, and that's not, what she says about feminism doesn't represent what she's always like in her private life, and that's very different for me because I'm maybe a bit more exaggerated because I'm on a smaller screen, but I'm me in my
Hmm.
hangouts and on my channel. I don't say things that I wouldn't be willing to say to your face or that I wasn't sincere about. But what I don't know that they always realize is that people take them seriously. And people, though,
Oh,
who
yes.
take their arguments over to our comment section and rain them down on us. And we're like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
And then you go to them and they go, well, I don't really think that. I just do that for entertainment. And like, well, you've got fallout of your actions here.
Well, that it's almost worse in a way because I don't. I have more respect for at least someone being honest and saying X, Y, and Z than playing a character and yet feeding into the same nonsense because that's just irresponsible. I don't even know, money grabbing possibly. I don't know. It's
Hmm.
that doesn't sit well.
Yeah, I mean, it was because, and perhaps, how do I put this? Because if you act like, oh my God, SJWs are coming for us all, they're going to get us, take our freezing peaches and run away, Um, some people are coming to us and basically saying, you Nazi, how can you possibly come and take my freedom from me? Like, what is the matter with you? And I'm going, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, this sort of exaggerated and hyperbolic response, as the one janitor said, and I don't want to take his question away from him, but it's something that we see. I see it constantly. I mean, just this idea um, that we're monsters. It's like you really have to sort of dial this down a little bit. Yeah, maybe there have been some situations that sort of got out of hand as far as young people when they go and they do protests or they speak out. They're sometimes they're just 19 or 20 years old and they're a little more exaggerated than they would be if they had really sort of sat and thought about this. But that's a common practice since forever, since recorded history. If you go back and look at what people thought about the young people in the 60s or the 70s and how they were acting, it's always the same thing. It's, oh my God, these crazy people are going to tear our society up by the roots and throw it away. And of course they don't, because they get older and they get a little more measured and they start to understand things with a little more um, nuance, shall we say. And then things, it just sort of works itself out. It's um, so the idea that, oh my God, this is really such a terrible thing because they protested Milo Yiannopoulos or they yelled at him. It's like, no, that's sort of, if that's the worst thing if you're dealing with a movement as huge as feminism is, I mean, we're talking about millions of people. And if you have to go back 4 years to when somebody pulled a fire alarm in Canada, you're not dealing with a hate group. Like, I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm sorry to burst that bubble for you, that is not the way hate groups work,
Yeah.
right?
To take it back a second to the use of jargon, whether it be cook or SJW or whatever. One of the questions from the original white guys have questions for SJWs, to which our video was sort of a mimic of in response. The Chris Reagan question of overuse of the phrase racist and sexist, I thought was probably the height of lack of self awareness because they've misused phrases like cuck, mangina, SJW, any number of other. We all know the stupid fucking phrases they use, and I just think how utterly unaware of yourself do you have to be to project in that way?
Mm. And I think that there is a real difference in how we do use some of these terms sometimes, right? Because it seems like when they speak about racism and sexism, and I think this was something that was talked about in the Hangout yesterday, Kristi, um, they mean something very sort of overt individual racism. You know, they're not necessarily talking about implicit biases. They're not talking about things sort of on a gradient. Like I would say I'm racist. If somebody said, "Are you racist?" I would say, "Yeah." And what I mean by that is, you know, I was raised in a racist society and I have implicit biases. Most people do. You can go right now, you could go to Harvard implicit bias test and get a test on your biases. And it is something designed by a neurologist, and it will tell you, yeah, you're a little racist. You're a little sexist. You're a little homophobic. You know, you were raised in that society from when you were a little tiny child with no defenses against whatever it was you were picking up. So, yeah, it's in there. And it's just a question of being aware of it, really.
Yeah, and when you're aware of it, then you can work on it. And that's the whole point. Is it's the when someone points out to you that something you said was racist or sexist.
Mm.
Okay, because this is a very timely issue. The day that we're recording it is when the Trump tape emerged in the
Yeah.
American presidential election, and I saw that, and I was particularly outraged. And a friend of mine was being very flippant about it, and that made me angry. And we had an interaction. I was civil. I wasn't warm, but ideally,
Mm.
in that situation, what I should be pointing out is, I know you're making a joke of this, but this is actually something I've experienced. Every woman I've talked to about this has experienced this. This is a real problem for us. So you
Mm.
making a joke out of this is not going to help me not experience this again or any other woman experience it again. Help
Yeah.
us. Don't laugh it off.
Mm.
Where I was going with this, but it was a very important point. I
Well,
think it
I
comes to like how you talk about things in the labels. And yeah, getting it back to it is, yeah, I have biases, just like CC, as I like to call her, because Chrissy also does that.
Yeah,
I hope you're okay with that. I do that all the
I
time.
am. No, I'm
Okay,
cool with that.
so CC,
well, I
so
found
getting
it.
back to I'm sorry, Kevin's point about the terms. Yeah, Kevin, go ahead. I'm sorry, I
Oh
cut
no,
you
I
off.
was just going to make a stupid joke about if just for this hangout she'd spelt her name with a K, we could have been the KKKs. I'm just opportunity missed.
It well, blame my mother. She named me Christina with a C. So
Well,
crazy woman that she
that
is.
was that was poor forward planning, clearly.
It really was. She should have known.
And and there's also one other thing, and if I remember, I want to bring it up when I do my questions next week with Phil Martiarty and you, Chrissy, and whoever else is going to be joining for that last one. But when I listen to a lot of if I can sort of stomach to listen to Carl for any length of time, or when I was listening again to the Garrett Hangout with Shoe on Head and Armored Skeptic, and I want to say this, people probably haven't, maybe some people have listened this far. I really hope they have, because this is really important. And I want to say this to the people who are suspicious of SJWs, or even people who are just egalitarians or people who are feminists too. One thing I've noticed is that there's a conflation between feminism and feminists. So people will say things like in this hangout that I referenced several times, feminism has a PR problem,
Mm.
or feminism thinks. And it's really important that we distinguish between ideas and people. Feminism is set out of ideas. It can't think things, it can't believe things, it can't
Yeah.
teach things, right? People have opinions and beliefs and attitudes, and they can say things. And it would be very helpful if everybody made a conscious effort to distinguish when they're talking about feminism as the concept, or describing feminist critique, or talking about feminist ideas or academia, and when you're talking about what individuals do think and say. Please, everyone, please.
Okay, we're done with the serious stuff for a moment.
Yes, please go on.
Because as we've been talking, as I will do with all of my hangouts, I flick between social media, see what people are up to, see what's going down, and having briefly mentioned it, it's
How dare you?
worth bringing. I know I listen to every word as well. I'm one of the few men in the world that can actually multitask. I am I'm perfect. Anyway,
Mhm.
well, speaking of people who wrongly assign themselves perfect, Donald Trump. Uh, the strangest thing in the world just happened. My mind, I think, has melted because we now live in a world where the Tic Tac company, the makers of breath fresheners, have just had to release a statement saying that they distance themselves from the comments made by Donald Trump.
Wow. Wow. Everybody is running away from Donald Trump.
when you know you live in a weird world where you've got America being stalked by evil clowns and the Tic Tac company have been inserted into the presidential race. What amazing.
If I start on that topic, I won't be able to stop. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna hold back the dam.
Oh, can I say on implicit bias? I was just because I've been doing some research because people wanted research done on systemic and institutional racism and all of that. Um, and I saw that there was a study recently done saying that if gamers play as black avatars, their implicit bias is reduced. So I just thought that was weird, but
I think
funny.
that's really good.
Yeah.
It's
So
literally walking in someone else's shoes.
yeah.
And so it makes you more empathetic. That's great. I think that's fantastic. And there should be more options like that on every game so more people have an opportunity to explore that.
Yep. I've just got to, fire up the World of Warcraft again. It's been a long time.
Sorry if you heard a crash, bang, and wallop. Then I would had to let the cat out.
Is that
Well,
Rory?
he does
Yeah,
really roost.
yeah. Well, he does this. He gets all worked up because I'm in the room on my own, but I'm speaking aloud, so he thinks I'm talking to him, and he gets quite annoyed by it. He can't work out why I want his attention.
It's like, why are you bothering me? You have
Yeah.
no chicken.
Then I sort of nudge him away, and he's like, "What the fuck, dude? Stop giving me mixed messages." Yeah.
So, did you want to move on to your second question? I think Tom should be joining us shortly, so this might work out really well.
Great. Um, oh, you know what? I would like to say a lot of people said that they liked my questions particularly. Maybe that's just something that people were saying to everybody, but I got a lot of that feedback. And I think it was because I had answered the white men's questions and I had answered women's questions. And I started to get the sense of, the problem is people really think that they're being very clear because they're in it. They're in their own bubble. And when I turn around and say, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, they get very offended and they're like, what do you mean? You should totally know this. This is common knowledge. And it's like, it's common knowledge to you. It is not common knowledge to me. And I think that ties into something that you were saying earlier. So that's why it just popped into my head. So I was very careful in my questions to the point of being really boring and tedious about the way I was asking them and driving Kristi crazy because oh, I re-uploaded this question again. I just fixed the wording.
You weren't the only one. It's okay. And it turned
So,
out well.
so it was to be very, very clear and specific as much as you possibly could. And I think that's why my question sort of went over well, is that people didn't feel like, there's a lot of complaints like, this is a disingenuous question, this is a disingenuous question, and some of them really are. Some of the questions that I got when I was answering questions were so obviously loaded. They might as well have been, why the hell do you suck so much, but some of them, like when I, Sugar Tits asked a question about workers, being left let to go home every time they had their periods, and feminism has gone toxic. And I just went, citations, please. And it turned out there was some, I don't know, one
Well, what
company in the UK. It's like, but I wouldn't know that. I'm not in your bubble. And I don't know random UK personnel problems. So,
Total fallacies.
well,
right.
what I want to know is why didn't you answer the question of why do you suck so much? I mean, that's such an obvious story. I mean, your refusal to answer. Your silence on the topic only incriminates you further, Kristi. That's all I can say.
Well, that's true. It is true. Um, what can I say? I think it's all feminism's fault because feminism. No, I'm just kidding.
Because feminism believes that.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
feminism made me do it.
Yeah, the feminism monster that lives under the bridge. Definitely.
All right, so now I'll go on. I'll stop wasting everybody's time. So my second question was about Muslims, and it was about, it was sort of a two-parter. And the first part was, if you sort of say that you're all about the ideas, you're not about the people, but you're sort of surrounded by bigotry and hate and people throwing these terrible slurs out or saying awful things about the people, then, why would anybody take that seriously? It was sort of the gist. I was a lot more careful about my wording. So, and then the second thing was, when you talk about moderate Muslims, would you have those, would you invite people onto your channel? And from all the responses I got, I came to believe that I was in fact projecting something onto people, in the sense that when I go to make a YouTube video and communicate something, I generally have a goal in mind and an audience in mind, and I tailor it to them. Like I'm, there's a plan there. And it seems like the people who perhaps spend a lot of their time, some of the people who spend a lot of their time criticizing Islam or criticizing this ideology don't necessarily have a plan, or either that or they have a plan that I'm not getting, if that makes sense. Like, to me, I'm looking at, okay, Muslims are 1.6 billion people strong, and they're the fastest growing religion. So if I'm going to talk to them, and I know that I have all these sort of bridges that I already have to hurdle, right? Like there's language and cultural issues that I'm sort of got to go through just to get the conversation going. So I'm going to try to, get rid of any additional hurdles that might otherwise be getting in my way. And I'm not going to let people say raghead because, I know that a Muslim person will take one look at that and say, no, this person's an asshole, right? I don't care what they have to say about the Quran. What the hell do they know? They think they're just bigots. So for that reason, I have that very much in mind, and it has puzzled me why they would even bother, like, to go out of their way to criticize Islam while making it almost a definite that Muslims would never watch them, or any Muslims that did would become convinced that they were just hateful and therefore wouldn't take them seriously. Is this making sense to other people? Because this is sort of a puzzle now for me that I'm trying to work out.
Yeah, I get the impression with a lot of people, and obviously it varies from person to person, but I get the impression that a lot of them aren't doing it in order to try and flag up problems with Islam. They're just bigots. And that's part of the problem. Those people make a conversation impossible. As for the other people, I don't think that they necessarily see that distinction. I think they are happy to ally themselves with people who are incredibly nefarious in their intent, and essentially you see them possibly as useful idiots, possibly as actual genuine allies, and it makes it so toxic that it's difficult to engage. I mean, I know both Kristi and I are critics of Islam. Let's say.
And I am as well, and
Well,
I've been
yeah,
specific about,
yeah.
you
No,
know,
the
I'm
reason I didn't add Kristi CC there was because
mhm,
I'd not discussed it with her before, but I know I had with Kristi. So all three of us are critics of Islam, but find it difficult. It's almost like walking on eggshells because they've placed those eggshells there.
right. And then of course they would say that we place the eggshells there because we call them Islamophobic or bigoted, but then sometimes they really are. Like, I'm not going to lie about that and not call out bigotry, because to me, bigotry, if there's one human idea that has caused more problems than religion, it would be this sort of just sort of a general bigotry, in group, out group, these people over here, um, which is sort of just a common denominator of all kinds of genocide and hate and
Well,
everything evil.
well, I see them as intrinsically linked in many ways because one of the driving forces behind much bigotry is tribalism, and that can absolutely be based on religion.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, and it doesn't have to be different religions. You look at, I mean, not far from me at all, Northern Ireland. They're all Christians, but yet they fucking despise one another for no other reason than you believe in a slightly different version of the same God as I do.
Mm.
My perception of it is that the channels that make that kind of content that we're talking about in terms of critiquing Islam are made by people who are expecting an audience that is already hostile to Islam. They're not expecting anybody watching to actually be Muslim. And so I think that informs a lot of the discourse, and also maybe just the sort of lip service to I'm criticizing ideas but not people, and then going ahead and making that mistake of conflating people and ideas again that
Mm.
we talked about in the feminism part. So I think that that is definitely part of the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, I know from my own personal experience, there's loads of stuff that I'd like to have said or videos I might have made, but I don't want people to associate my channel with theirs. And I don't just do that out of tribalism. I do that because there are lots of channels out there doing that sort of content, and many of them are deeply bigoted. So even when you're saying things that aren't actually bigoted, you can come across that way because people have heard that sort of thing from actual bigots, and that's really toxic and dangerous in terms of public discourse.
Well, what I
Yeah.
find too is, there's a critique that comes up during specific incidents about sexual assault and refugees or people from predominantly Muslim countries. But what the other side isn't doing then is taking that outrage about sexual assault in that particular case and acknowledging that if you want to actually really powerfully critique Islam, then feminist critique is incredibly powerful on the basis of human equality. And if they became very
Mm.
familiar with feminist critique, that they'd actually be able to construct some really powerful arguments about Islam and the way that it views gender relations.
Yeah.
But it's, they don't
I,
go that far. And I think, it's the resistance to the idea that feminism could be in any way useful that
yeah,
is actually stopping them from making good arguments.
yeah. I think that's actually a really good point,
Mm.
and links back into a thing that I said earlier about the idea of conceding any point means their entire house of cards collapses. It's a very, very strange attitude to have, and I think
Mm.
shows an inherent insecurity in their own philosophy, if that makes sense. But
Mm.
to bring it back to the point of Islamic rape or whatever, this thing that they've got this obsession with at the moment. Again, part of it, you can see that it's based on bigotry in large part, not necessarily all of them, of course, but in large part because these are the very same people who will defend white rapists. But yet, once you start getting a few brown people raping, all of a sudden it's an epidemic. It's rape culture. It's this, that, and the other. And you think, well, hang on, how can that possibly be? And then you look at the skin color or the region of the world these people are from, and all of a sudden it clicks and makes sense. The very same people that will defend Brock Turner are
Mm.
absolutely outraged by the very same thing being done by brown folk.
Mm. Yeah. To get back to Kristi's point for a moment, and because just how Islam had come up on my channel was when I was talking about the book Beyond God the Father, which was written by Mary Daly back in the day. Um, and one of her major points is we have to attack religion because it's misogynist, but it works the other way around too. Like if you point out that this whole narrative that these patriarchal religions are based on, that women are subservient and lesser and inferior, if you start to twist that and turn that on their heads, then you are implicitly and directly attacking their whole belief system. And that, you know, you're showing that, oh no, this thing that God created, it's not like that at all. So there's a problem here, and a logical issue that is just about to be flipped right on its head, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Um, so an empowered woman is an implicit attack on patriarchal religions.
Yeah, definitely. And if, people who want to critique Islam take up a feminist critique, then it's
Mm.
going to be coming, they're going to have to face the same kind of issues that we have gotten to in terms of where we are in our feminist theoretical development, which is it's not just about giving women the right to vote. They need economic independence so that they can make a living and be truly, economically free to make decisions about their lives. They need healthcare or reproductive control over their body so they can time the number and spacing of their children to best optimize their family and what they can afford. So you get into wider and wider issues about women's humanity, and then you start to unpack things about, well, why is it that men don't get to take time off and be good fathers? And you have all of the same issues coming up about the questioning and breaking down patriarchy and restructuring it in a way that better reflects the concept of egalitarianism and humanism.
Mm.
And that,
And
that would be actual egalitarianism rather than the pathetic
Right.
facade that some people put up.
and there is a progressive movement, a democratic movement, a feminist movement within Islam. Um, some people may argue about that, but I mean, to me, as a feminist, I don't tell other people what to believe in terms of their religions, and I'm not holding back women's rights until they've done what I told them to do and started thinking the way that I tell them to think. It may be that the expectation, when I look at the problems that Europe is facing now with immigration and with, um, you know, uh, these various immigrants from Middle East and Northern Africa, um, they'll be lucky if that is sorted out in a generation. Just looking at history, I don't know if you guys agree. That's the
Yeah,
sort of thing, it takes a long time to work out, and it
ab-
takes.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important because the idea that you could get rid of their religion is an absurdity. So clearly, focusing purely on that is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize that change comes from within.
Mm,
It's not going to be secular Western feminists that's going to get change in Islam. It's going to be moderate, liberal, feminist men and women, like the men in Iran who were putting headscarves on themselves and taking pictures to stand in solidarity with their wives who were being forced to wear the head covering.
mm.
We need those allies. We need the men to stand up for the women, and not just the
True,
women to stand up for the women.
true, true.
So
The one addendum I would add to that would be the ways in which Western feminists, liberal feminists, can have impacts is by forcing Western governments to support secular forces in the region.
Mm.
By forcing our governments not to sell weaponry to Saudi Arabia, which is then used to crush, at least in part, secular forces in Yemen, for instance.
All right.
And if I could just throw in, because it's been floating around, and I've been waiting for a pause in the conversation to throw this in. So, on the issue of us criticizing Islam, I did a hangout with the skeptic feminists where I did a feminist critique of the burqa. And I laid out from a feminist perspective why I think that it's a special case of being a situation where the state should intervene on behalf of somebody who is powerless in order to bring some equity that otherwise can't exist in that relationship, in the situation where women are wearing burqas. Now, I don't want to debate the issue, but the point was the comment section on that video was really quiet, really quiet. not a lot of comments. And then later, when we had done our video, and it was the response video was being done, the live stream of it, I think with Kraut and Tea, right? At one
Mm.
point, he was going on about Islam because that's what he does. And he said something about, these people don't make videos on Islam. And I was in the chat. I actually think, Cece, you were in the chat too.
Yep.
And we wanted to, I was like, oh, can we get them distracted and talking about us during their live stream? And they did. They totally like went off topic and they started trying to have conversations with us. And so that was a lot of fun. But
Well, it is fascinating to hear that, because I know loads of feminists who've done videos about these things, and it's almost
Oh
like they're
yeah.
purposefully ignoring it because it goes against their narrative.
yes. And then in the comments, I said, well, I did a video on ban the burqa.
Hmm.
And he said, oh, you did a video on ban the burqa. Well, have you done one on Muslim migration patterns? I'm like, moving the goalpost fallacy? You just
Well,
said,
Chrissy,
you know.
you have never done one on falafel production. That is a disgrace.
Yeah, it is. That is always the way. If you've done XYZ, then you're wrong because you didn't do,
Well,
TUV as well, and
on
it's
on a,
just
on a
ridiculous.
slightly silly point that I think Chrissy will definitely appreciate, the British comedian Stuart Lee had a fantastic piece about when people ask him to do jokes about Islam, and it's just this fantastic skit. You should definitely search out on YouTube, where he does like really silly jokes um, about like the top name for British kids is Mohammed, and that's just the girls. Dudum, and then and then he does this fake skit between the person going, no, 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 you don't do jokes about Muslims like that. And basically, the whole point is they want them to do hateful, bigoted jokes about Muslims.
Right.
And that's the point. We're not going to do those fucking jokes, or he's not going to do those jokes. We're not going to do those videos. But that doesn't mean that we haven't done videos about Islam, just not in the bigoted way you want us to.
Yeah.
I
I
can
mean,
echo
I
that.
worked. Sorry.
I was just going to echo that. I feel more when people bring those issues up, like why don't you make a video about Islam and women or Islam and whatever? I always feel like it's why don't you hate on Muslims more? It's not
Mm.
about critiquing Islam. And so I just wanted to say that I get the same thing impression that Kevin has.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Muslim doctors and nurses, and they were some of the just the best people, And I know when Syria was going to hell, they brought over a Christian doctor. They sort of rescued him out of Syria to bring him over because, once things sort of get all fucked up, then all of a sudden it's everybody for their own side. And he was literally um, dodging machine gun fire every day to try to go to a hospital without water or medicine and try to, save people's lives. And it just got to it where his entire family was targeted. So there's these Muslim people intervening because their families know his families, and they're bringing him over, and they're helping out the family. There was a Muslim nurse who, um, when those 200 young women or girls were kidnapped from the school, she had gone over to that country, to Nigeria.
Nigeria, yeah.
Yeah,
The Boko Haram, yeah.
yeah. Um, and she was trying. Nothing really productive ever came of that. But I mean, there are people who are trying very hard. There are entire female, I think, Kurdish military groups, fighting
Yeah,
ISIS right now.
yeah. The parts of the YPJ, I believe it is the Civic Defense Forces, whatever they call themselves. Yeah, are
Right.
entirely. There's actually a fantastic article. If I find it, hopefully Chrissy will link it below. Fantastic article of telling the story of a Kurdish woman who'd been sold into sex slavery by ISIS, who then
Mm,
joined one of those female, essentially paramilitary groups. They're
mm,
not officially state sanctioned or anything. And then, yeah, unfortunately, she was killed, but she managed to take out a number of ISIS fighters and reclaim some town in
mm,
Syria. It was fantastic, a really heartwarming
fantastic.
story.
Yeah.
And if I could chip in, living in Cologne, it's a very international city, and I have met several people from Iran since I've been here. And about half of them, I would say, when you talk to them, about things, they'll come out as very secular. And
Mm,
the fact is that they couldn't be secular back in Iran, but they can be in Germany. And when they have the opportunity, their lives relax because they don't have the expectations and social pressures. So the other problem with dealing or treating Islam as a monolith is one, it's not even accurate in terms of how it divides up amongst itself in terms of its theologies and its sides and converts versus people who've like families going back, whatever, like just traditional Arab. I've heard a lot about, I think it was recently about sort of racism of Islam, that it's sort of,
mhm.
only one, people who are from the area are real Islam or Muslims, and then, converts aren't really the same level. But anyway, getting off topic. Um, Actually, I'm so off topic now that I forgot where I was going with this. But yeah, we can get back to the conversation now. I've totally lost my thread.
That's all right. No, I mean, it's they want the most simplistic narrative that they can come up with, right? So they want it to be all about Islam, all about the Quran. You know, that's the whole problem. Like, if you look at Saudi Arabia and you say, well, you have this historical monarchy, which is enriched beyond just insanity by oil money and is sort of using or manipulating the religion in their country to keep control because they want this absolute control. Um, and of course, we have all these sort of financial ties to Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is probably one of the most awful regimes that is going today. So, but when you look at this very complicated picture and you hear people just saying, well, just read the Quran, like that's all you have to do and then you know everything. And it's like, no, it's slightly more complicated than that,
Just a
and
little bit.
10 different majority Muslim countries have 10 different governments and 10 different histories and 10 different, relationships with us. So,
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Whenever you
And
get this kind of this nonsense about treating them as a monolith, you do have to ask them. Well, why are they killing each other then? If they're all of one mind?
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tom has not arrived yet. So I thought maybe to wrap it up, we could. Do you guys want to talk at all about the Trump tapes and give your reactions and thoughts?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
If you want to, Kevin, do you want to go ahead? I think because you also did a video on it, and it's you've been. I don't know if you continue to follow it, but I think you learned about it before I did. So
Yeah, well, I learned about it sort of last night. I even put out a little vine of the kind of the big moment, the grab them by the pussy. I mean, oh god, and not just that, but it's just that. I mean, that's the kind of the headline of the piece, but it's not even the be all and end all of it at all. It basically essentially amounts to him tacitly admitting to being a rapist. In essence, it's really a fascinating expose of the kind of frat boy mentality within those rich types, because obviously you've got Bill Bush involved as well, who I
I
believe
think
is the.
technically sexual assault, not rape, but
Oh yeah,
that's
okay, okay, but I mean, considering the
no, I
fact that
know.
he
Just
settled out of court with his first wife on a rape case, it suggests to me that oh god, I mean, I dread to think what kind of a monster he is behind closed doors. Um, yeah, I did a quick thing basically asking those that claim to be on the left, people like Sargon and the Amazing Atheist, to come out and denounce the man because he is, like I said, as you rightly point out, Chrissy, a sexual assaulter rather than necessarily a rapist. Um, and they claim to be egalitarians, so clearly they would have to, come out and denounce them. They haven't, obviously, because they don't really give a shit. And it's that kind of frat boy bullshit, which ultimately I think will be the death of the Trump campaign, because ultimately the very thing he's used to get to the position he is, the kind of sensationalism of the media, now they've given them something to be really upset about because it's
Mm.
to do with. I mean, they were sort of okay with him shitting on Latinas and blacks and people like that, but now he's having to go at a white woman, and that's
Oh
just
well.
not on.
We don't do that. And I wondered, and this might be uncharitable of me, but I wondered if part of it was when he was talking about having a go at married white women.
That's also true.
Um, because I think that, when I hear that certain conservatives are up in arms with who haven't really cared about any of the other stuff, like, we've cared all along, but like they could, yeah, whatever, it's fine, it's Trump, it's good. Um, but suddenly they're very upset. And I wondered if, his talking about sort of pursuing very aggressively a married woman, coming at her like a bitch or something like that, he said, um, wasn't part of the issue that they had with that.
Yeah, I think that's possibly so. And not just that, but one thing that just annoyed me was his description of it has nice legs. It, not even a fucking being of any name, just it.
You
Jesus.
wonder how a 50-year-old man with daughters can do that, can be
Well,
that
this is the
way.
question I ask, and it might sound incredibly crass in a way, and it's sort of supposed to be. But whenever you get someone like that, you ask them, "Well, would it be okay if I went and grabbed your wife's pussy? Then are you
Mm.
okay with that? Would that be fine to do?"
Well, if you're on TV.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Well,
um,
YouTube's kind of like TV, I suppose.
I did see that Sargon Carl had a hangout with a guest. They watched the Trump tape, and they were, of course, laughing it off and laughing at it. And basically, I think Carl said that it was very cringy. Was the worst condemnation I heard. I only watched like the first 5 minutes because I kind of got the
Well,
gist of it.
I don't think we
But
should be particularly surprised by that because if you remember the hangout you did with it, the debate you had when you were describing the rape victim with semen on her face, he was laughing like a schoolchild.
yeah, and I think I'm going to sort of just speculate here, but I think the knee-jerk reaction was anything with sexual assault and it should be mocked. And what he didn't realize is how seriously people in the States are taking this, that this admission of his, that what he
Mm.
said he was doing, it indicates that that's how he physically treated women, and it gives a lot of credence to the stories that we've heard about him coming out and more coming out now. And you can't, as I think Cece pointed out earlier, if you want an egalitarian society, then you can't have women in these situations and expect them to feel like they're in a fair workplace or that they're being treated with dignity. And on Facebook, I posted an article from a man who was saying men need to denounce Trump because, this guy was saying, I've been in a lot of locker rooms. I've never heard men talk like this in locker rooms, talk about women this way. That's my personal experience. But Trump doesn't speak for all men
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
when he laughs this off, this is just how men talk, because he reduces all men to what he does. And I think men should be standing up and saying, that's nothing like me. Don't speak for me, Donald Trump.
yeah. This. I mean, not.
But that's not what they did.
I know. This is a typical thing, and a complaint. I think is quite right. But I'm going to turn a feminist thing into a let's look at the men again bit by saying that not only is this incredibly, obviously, misogynistic, but the response to it is actually incredibly misandrist. Because imagine for a second that a feminist had come out and said, "Oh well, all men joke about sexually assaulting women and trying to fuck married women and cheating on their partners. That's all
Mm.
perfectly natural." They would be castigated. The very same people that spent so long desperately trying to, every time you had a conversation, it was hashtag not all men. Well, apparently now it is all men.
I was just picturing the feed of Thunderfoot and Sargon and the Amazing Atheist and everybody just falling over themselves at that video, Kevin. Like if a woman said that.
Oh, I just got a message from Tom saying that he'll be here in around 20 minutes, that he's
Please,
running late.
are you?
Um,
How are you doing for time? Are you having a pleasant enough time where we can stay on that long, or do you need to get going on?
right now I'm okay. I don't know if I'll be able to stay on the whole time. So do we want to pick on innocent little alt-right rationals? Because I do have somebody had sent me this Twitter feed from the Autopsy 87 Drucifer.
Oh, please go
Um,
ahead.
so he's talking to somebody called Nibupsha. I don't know. And he says they'll run with this while the Hillary leaks fade into obscurity. I think it'll hurt him. Shouldn't? No, but people are retards. And then someone called the conservative said, um, I'm the gorilla dicked nigga. I make dyke pussy wet. Donald Trump, like um, that was a quote from him. Hashtag Trump tape, and he says, "Lol. I wish Trump had said that. I'd quit my job and volunteer for his campaign." So we're dealing with a lot of rationality. I think that's our major point there. Yeah, just
Yeah,
Well,
sometimes I weep for humanity.
yeah, I think
I love and hate our species sometimes.
I think it's worth bearing in mind the difference between the kind of scum you get on the internet and most people. I think most people viewing that tape will have been annoyed, and I think you will see a corresponding dip in the poll numbers from the already pathetically low level he's at.
mm,
Well, certainly
And
what's
not just
different
that,
about
but I think.
this. Oh,
Sorry, I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say I read a thing in the immediate aftermath saying that straight away they've now pulled hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of advertising that they were going to have in key swing states. I mean, we're talking Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, the rest.
mm,
I think even the Trump campaign are now basically accepting defeat.
yeah.
Well, certainly what makes this different is when he made a video where he said he was sorry if people were offended. I don't know that he's ever said the words "I'm" and "sorry" together before.
True, but even then, it was still a mealy mouthed load of old shite. It wasn't a proper apology.
Oh, yeah,
No.
definitely. Maybe it's the closest he's come. And then more importantly, he's just been shedding endorsements all day. Kelly Ayotte, Hugh Hewitt asked for him to step down. The third highest Republican in the Senate said he was unendorsing him. Paul Ryan disinvited him to an event in Wisconsin. Mike Pence also ended up not showing up.
Mm,
People were going to, Trump supporters were going to stay around to heckle Paul Ryan. And I think this is actually what might bring down the Republican Party is if the establishment break away from Trump, the Trump supporters might go to the polls and vote for Trump, but not for the Republican establishment, their Senate candidates, their House candidates. And the Republicans will go to the polls, and they won't vote for Trump, but they'll vote for their candidates. So they'll split within their own party.
mm.
And maybe that will end up with the Democrats getting the Senate and the White House.
Very possibly because on actually Paul Ryan looks in a significant amount of trouble in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, couldn't happen to a better guy. Um, I wanted to pull it back to sort of why I sort of brought these things up, the amazing atheist Sargon and uh, autopsy 87, which is just this idea. One of the other things that Trump did recently that didn't get quite as much play, but he was at a rally and he said, all right, everybody here who's not a Christian, raise your hand, because he was talking. So anybody who was not of the right religion had to raise their hand. And then he's saying things like, oh, should we let him stay? Should we kick him out? I guess they can stay, which between stuff like that, between the way that he talks to the evangelical right, between nominating someone like Mike Pence for his running mate, anybody who has just a nonce of concern for atheism and how atheists are treated or for secularism should be dead set against this guy. And it really has I don't know if they're just being foolish, right?
Well, let's
Or
call it what it is. They don't want a lady to be president.
yeah.
If
You can't have someone without a cock behind the fucking Oval Office desk. It would just be absurd to these people. The
yeah,
world would crash and burn.
so if I could perhaps bring together two things that are connected, one, the way that people talk to one another, and also somebody who has endorsed Trump, how TJ spoke to you this recently.
Well,
Because I mean, I think everyone knew he was going to be a jerk because that's kind of his shtick.
mm,
But the way that he addressed you, and also just the pure sort of I want to say arrogance. I don't know. He was speaking down to you as if he was more of an authority on an issue that he'd done nothing on, and you have actually in a career choice that you've worked in.
Well,
Mm,
actually, just that's almost.
And
Sorry.
if I can finish, sorry, but he was, I think that for him was the low point of
mm,
whatever he makes on these response videos. I maybe he'll outdo himself, who knows? But really, I think that you deserve a lot of credit for going high when he goes low, and you're forming this group. And
yeah.
maybe if he actually pulls his thumb out of his ass and takes enough time to look around and realize that he needs to put his money where his mouth is, if he joined and brought his followers, to help you on an issue, that you would be focused on the issue and not on past grievances. And that says a lot about you and where your priorities are and the kind of person you are. So I just wanted to say that I totally support you in the face of what he did. And I mean, I always support you because I think you
Yeah.
do great work. But I just wanted to say I'm standing next to you, and because you did not deserve that at all, especially given what the tone of your question was aiming to do, which was to bring people together. And he tried to basically slap you in the face with his words.
Well, yes, but thank you. Thank you much. I did want to sort of talk, you've given me an opportunity to sort of talk about a little bit this idea of charity versus people who work and show up day after day after day to do the work. Like a charity drive is a great thing. It's good to have this sort of lump sum of money, but people, whatever that his charities went for, there are people who have to take that money and manage it and implement it, and there's staff that have to work with that and make sure that it gets where it's going and people are being helped. So if you give money to a shelter, there are people who work at the shelter, there are people who manage the shelter, so all these sort of, and those are two ends of the same coin. So the idea that you would bring nothing to the table when what you're bringing is hard work and experience and knowledge, all that really matters is the money. Like, I'm not sure where the disconnect there, what he thinks happens to the money after, it's raised and it leaves, if it just floats away and gets where it's supposed to go, or what he thinks is going on. But it seemed very strange to me. But
Well, I was just going to say, I tried to rudely interrupt Krista. The
mm,
idea of an uneducated, ignorant man taking on a woman who has potentially decades of experience in the field is very much a microcosm of the presidential race itself.
yeah, I never thought of it that way, but yeah, it's just and I don't want to make this group about spiting TJ, so I don't want to focus on it too much. I believe, my guess. See, he had talked earlier about how in the entire time that he's been making points about feminism, he could count on two hands the number of people who've sort of come back and argued against him. And I happen to be one of those people. And he saw my video, and then he just, I think he put it on his Facebook out to his followers, or may have tweeted it out, oh, this is boring. This is so boring. You can go watch this, but it's really boring. It's wasting your
He,
life to
yeah, he
watch
did.
this.
He did the same with my Descent of Manosphere video. It's a very common tactic. It's basically trying to flood it with hate.
Yeah. And that's, kind of what happened, but which is fine. I've been dogpiled by the best of them, and you've been dogpiled by even more. But it was, it's kind of like for him to say and to complain that people aren't taking his arguments seriously, when on the occasions that they do, and prior to him actually coming out and saying on some video at some point, I can't remember what one, like, I have these points about feminism, I never would have known because I don't watch him. He's just not my cup of tea. Uh, and I always thought he was strictly sort of an entertainer and a joker and those things. It never would have occurred to me to go looking to him for arguments. So it wasn't until he sort of announced that he had some that I even had the idea that responding to him would be something that would be even a concept. So I did, he says it's boring. But I mean, how is this a rational way of, and this goes, I think, to Philip Moriarty's question, where he says, you know, how do you reconcile this with your supposed worldview? And they say, well, or well, TJ said, well, what does asking evidence for claims have to do with anything? But being a rational, reasonable, skeptical person is a lot more than just asking for claims. It's a whole mindset, it's a worldview, it's a way of looking at problems, it's a way of looking at things, so that if people come to you and challenge your ideas, and the best that you have to say is boring. Boring. You know, don't expect them to come back twice. Why would they? But yet, here, you know, after he said this boring thing, I've had no interactions with him whatsoever. So it really took me by surprise that, you know, he's like, put your wallet away and shut the fuck up, bitch, and or take out your wallet, give me money, and shut the fuck up, bitch, or whatever it was he said. I don't want to get in trouble. I doing that from memory.
I think it was shut your mouth and open your wallet.
Yeah, something like that. Um, for him to sort of be like that, it demonstrated maybe he's a little more sensitive than he's letting on. Because otherwise, I honestly can't imagine like why somebody would say, "Oh, would you like to work with me on something?" Look, bitch, you know, like that's not. I don't understand that response outside of that. That's my only guess, you know.
Can I
But
ask you what you think if you were hoping for responses to your two questions that we've discussed? What
mm,
what would have been your hope for, you know, someone who made a sincere effort to engage with your question as it was meant to be put across?
well, my first question, you know, I did get that from many people, and I got just people who were just, yeah, I really would love to work with you. I'm interested in working with you. I'm interested in learning, you know, more about your experiences. You know, there was a lot of very genuine people coming forward and being all for it and thinking it's a great idea. So, as far as the Muslim question, I I think I wanted sort of, I guess, a reflection on. I think that the atheist community, the atheist movement, that doesn't want to say it's a movement or a community, but still sort of exists. So there it um, is going to find itself having feminism's problems if they ever get big enough to be annoying to anybody in power. That is, you know what I mean? Like, uh, Valerie Solanas has been dead for decades, and I still hear about her, and I'm sure you guys do too. Um, or we'll have, oh, what about kill all men? What about this? What about that? So when you have a movement that's where people are doing things that aren't good, it's still going to taint you, even if you had nothing to do with it. Like, I can't go back in time and help out Valerie Solanas and give her modern, you know, psychiatric drugs. And I can't go and tell the people from 3 years ago that maybe the kill all men joke wasn't that funny and it wasn't such a good idea and it could be taken really badly. You know, it's just one of those, it's one of those things, you know. So if they really want to sort of bridge out, the atheist movement right now is, and I don't call myself an atheist, um, but right now it's a very small demographic and it's a very specific demographic, and they haven't been able to sort of bridge the gaps that they would need to bridge in order to be more interesting to people who are outside their demographic. I don't know if you agree with what I'm saying. And I think that, to me, you know, God, they had all of the right things in place where they really could have. Like, they have a scientific mindset. They understand how these work. They could have looked into social sciences and really just gotten a great plan together. They had all the pieces. They had the money. They had the, you know, the stage, the platform. They really could have gone out and done this the right way. And instead, by being sort of social science denialists, and by falling in on their own various bigotries or denying that they even exist, they've sort of just they've bubbled themselves off into this very hard little group, and they don't even seem to see it. And it may seem that I'm rambling, but this is something that sort of frustrates me. I tend to look from the outside and to sort of look at things this way and say, God, it's secularism is such an important movement today, above all other things. Like, if we could really get out from underneath these rather unhelpful uh, religious ideas, or really conservative religious ideas, really fundamentalist religious ideas, boy, wouldn't that be great for the world? Wouldn't that help? But we're not going to do that if we're going to refuse to talk to people, and we're going to not think about how to talk to people or how to make sure that our message gets across. If we're just going to say, well, we're shitlords, so you're just going to have to be, you and your stupid feels are just going to have to go away. Like, well, yeah, me, my stupid feels, and everybody else who has human feelings, what is the game plan here? So that's what I keep going back. What's the plan? What are you trying to accomplish? And think about it. Think about, if you're going to be trying to accomplish something, what would be the right way to do it?
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that. There's a lot in there to unpack and a lot that I agree with completely, and I followed you and it was great. And so I'm just going to
Okay.
ramble for a bit, and if I go off on a tangent and get lost, then I'm sorry. But there's so much to unpack here in terms of the atheist movement, and I think you've really put your finger on something. But I would distinguish between the online atheist, YouTube movement in particular, and real life atheism,
Mm,
because I think there are both depressing signs and hopeful signs in the real life atheist movement in the US. The depressing signs are that we still have a situation where in atheist groups or whatever else, when people meet up to discuss secular issues, like meetups around the country, a lot of those have been historically dominated by white guys, and they're usually, in a situation where they don't necessarily have kids, or they have someone who can watch the kids, and so they put the meetings at sort of unsociable times for families. And when people get there, they're very male dominated spaces. And so if atheism wants to branch out, and not look around a room and have everybody look like you, but think half the population are women, where are women atheists, how can we make our meetings a place where more people want to come? How can we bring in people who Black Americans who have a different experience? What about people from Hispanic backgrounds? How is the
mm,
process of dealing with atheism different as dealing with a Protestant family or a Mormon family or a Jehovah's Witness family? What can
mm,
we do to support people who want to get out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, because it's really more complicated than a lot of people's Catholic experience or Protestant experiences. So in the real life atheism movement, we have these problem areas, but we also have, I think, in the sort of the leadership people, there's a lot of sensitivity to those kinds of issues and being more inclusive, as we saw in the Reason Rally. We also have
mhm,
women, especially, that's something I pay more attention to, but also people of color who are secular, working to have their own conferences in order to find people and bring speakers out and get more people aware, as well as more representation at conferences. But we do need a conscious effort to make that happen. And what happens on YouTube atheism, if that's people's first encounter with atheism, wow,
right,
are a lot of people not going to feel welcome? And that's going to stop, as you point out, the movement towards secularism, which is our ultimate gain or aim, in that we want to make sure that people are treated fairly and that the government doesn't try to use its power or authority to impose religious beliefs on anyone.
right.
And
C-
yeah, we're getting it our own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. That's what I wanted to say.
So to me, the atheists are sort of the cavalry, right? When it comes to these secular issues, which are still happening all over the country. I think the YouTube atheists think they kicked the religious people off of YouTube, so they won. You didn't. They just moved a little bit, and because they've been doing this a while,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you still have a lot of problems, and there's nothing to say. People have been declaring that they won over, that God has been dead since Life put out that thing 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever it was. God is dead on the cover. Well, no, he keeps coming back. So um, maybe he is just that reincarnating goodness. But it's just this. So atheism to me has always been about the ones at the cavalry, like I call them, the ones right on the tip. Because even though the atheists is a very small group within sort of these non-religious people, the nuns, as they're called, which is something more like around 20% now, I think. And you would probably know better than me.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. So that's a sizable group, but within that, like something like only 3% of that 20% is atheist, or
Yeah, very small amount. Yeah.
yeah.
Like 6%, I think I've seen.
Yeah. So they're not getting even the non-religious people on board as much as they could be, which would make them much more of a force to be reckoned with. Um, and in order to do that, they have to be able to think 10 years in the future. They have to be able to think about how they're doing things, and how they're structuring their movement, and how they're sort of selling it to people. And if they think that just being shitlords is going to do it, it isn't. Because, you know, other than us, other shitlords, it's not that impressive to people. It really isn't. It does not impress adult people, mature people, people of real concerns. When I look at women in religion, they're doing a lot of the work, right? They're the people who run the bake sales and clean up after everybody, and they run the Sunday schools, and they do all the sort of little tasks that just keep the whole thing running. And they do it because of their communities, they do it because of their families, they do it because of their children, much more, in my experience anyway, than they do because they just love God that much. It's much more, that's what you're sort of raised in these religious groups, that's your role, that's what you should do. So they're not, if you can't interact with these people, if you can't talk to people on their ground, then you're not going to get them over, and I think also with the Black community, the historical significance of the church in the Black community is something that you can't just oh, it doesn't matter. Yes, it matters very much, you know. And when you have this history of the church is the place where people come together and bond together so they can fight against their oppression, when you have some white guy saying, oh, no, 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 come join us now, by the way, we're assholes. You know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We're dicks. And we're going to call you these names, and we're going to treat you like some sort of big whiny baby if you don't like it. I don't know. I just, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I would say that, to bring it back to your point about the label of, being like feminism. I mean, I've recently like heard a couple of the podcasts from Eli Bosnick, who I've learned is a amazing like social justice advocate, and he had a couple of interesting interviews. One of the ones that he said he knows a woman. I think that he said she was a Black woman, and they talked about her not really believing in God and stuff, but she did identify as an atheist. And he asked, well, why, why is that? And her response was, well, if I did, look who would represent me.
Mm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and that's when he realized, right, we've got a problem. We've got to make sure that people feel included. And right now, there isn't that feeling of inclusion. If you don't see the world through the eyes of me, the dominant sort of voice here, which tends to be straight white men, then you're complaining, or your views are invalid, or you're a social justice warrior, or whatever else. And we're not
Right.
going to get beyond that 6%, like you said, if that's the face of atheism.
Kevin, did we lose you?
No, so I just thought it would be a little bit on the nose for a straight white man to dominate discussion. For straight white men to dominate discussion. I thought that would be too much. That would be like privilege inception or something. It'd be ridiculous.
No.
But I
But yeah,
think,
no, I agree generally with what the points that were being made for what it's worth.
and intersection. This is intersectionality again being important because like with men standing up saying, "Look, Trump doesn't speak for me." It's also important to have white straight males saying, these people don't speak for me either. If nothing else, just to stand in solidarity with everybody else, going, that's really not all we are. That's
Yeah.
not all what we are.
Well, yeah, and not just that, but I mean, uh, in the idea that it's locker talk, to the Trump defence. Well, I've been in locker rooms and I've been in male only spaces and things, and outside of some very rare exceptions, most people don't talk in that way. They certainly don't speak for me and the people I know.
Mm.
So we've now been waiting 25 minutes for Tom.
Yeah, Tom, come on.
Tom, you better have lost a leg or something. You know what I mean?
Because I think the message came in at 12 minutes after, and I've got 39 after now, and he said 20 minutes then. So I would say, do you want to give it like another 10 minutes or so of chatting? Otherwise, it's like getting, 20 to midnight. I could keep going, I guess, but
Well, I have to get
yes.
going pretty soon anyway. But yeah, I'll stick around 10 minutes. That's cool. But that's
All right. But then we'll need a new topic. So did you want to give maybe one of your other reactions to the comment, reactions to some of the other questions that were asked that you had?
well, one thing is Harry, no, sorry, H bomber guy. Um, he asked some questions that were obviously meant in a sort of joking way, a satirical way, perhaps. And I just noticed that the Just a Jokesters lost their humor really fast when the
Yeah,
joke
a
was
little
on
bit.
them. Just like immediately, they're like, "Oh, that's not funny." Like, I thought it was funny. Like, I know you. I don't find bearing funny, and some people do. Just a thought.
Yeah, and it also seemed to be a way to deflect from his questions. I mean,
Mm.
his question about, if there are real problems out there, why aren't you talking about the real problems and just let the feminists get on with whatever they're talking about, as opposed to just whining about it forever?
Mm. You do a lot of humor, Kevin. Do you find that people take your humor very well?
It depends. It depends if it's aimed at them. No, but that's sort of the point. Yeah, no, the one thing I found is that people who would already have taken you out of context had you been talking seriously will do so with comedy as well. If they
Mm.
want to be, if they want to feign offence or to claim that you're some sort of hideous monster, they'll do so. So it sort of doesn't matter whether you're talking seriously or being sarcastic or whatever.
Mm.
Yeah, but what about the response in general? We certainly got a big response. Do you like you see one positive thing come out of it? Do you think some people at least, seem to um, think about things differently in your experience of looking over the responses and the comments and things?
Hmm. Different. Uh. Mm, well, I think that would be a tall order for questions. But I did see certainly some people that were interested in having a dialogue. So I think that's very positive. And I saw people that were I saw a lot of people that assumed that we would never touch on these subjects. We would never look at the responses, and that certainly Steve Shives would never look in the responses and never do anything. So I think it was positive that we sort of took them seriously enough to sort of read through them. I commented on a lot of people's, whenever I watched something, I would throw in a little comment like, "Oh, hey, great thanks for doing this or whatever, just to let them know that I was around, that people were taking them seriously, people were taking the time. If you answer the questions, yeah, I'll come over and I'll look at what you had to say. Unless you're immediately horrifically obnoxious, which some people were, which, I'm not going to subject myself to that endlessly, but, for the most part, people were pretty okay about it. So,
yeah, I think the thing to bear in mind is that it's almost, well, not almost, it is impossible to really judge whether this has been a successful endeavor or not, because ultimately, like a lot of educational activism, for want of a better phrase, a slightly less absurd phrase, it's when you talk about whether people think about things differently or look at things differently, it's impossible to know unless you're inside that person's head. So essentially, if we planted a few seeds in a few minds, and maybe at the very least made people less extreme in their opposition toward feminism or social justice or whatever, then I think that would have been a great thing, all round, a worthwhile endeavor,
yeah, at least to see us as, oh, I know those people, I know those guys. They're
Yeah.
not, they don't have horns coming out of their head and
Like,
flames coming out of their ears.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've noticed that. Like when I've talked with people like Sargon or whoever, just instantly, just having that human to human connection instantly breaks down a lot of the barrier. You can't demonize someone that isn't a demon.
Right.
Unless you're Bearing telling him to shut up.
True, but I got to tell him to go fuck himself on a live stream, so I mean, I'm happy with that.
That sounds like, yeah, you guys broke even. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Look who
I'm
finally
here.
shows up.
I'm sorry, man. I had like, I was running errands and I hit like every red light. So I'm here now.
Yeah,
I
we were doing
guess.
like the warm-up band that had to keep going out for encores, before the main event came on. So, but now you're
Mhm.
here.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it would be really funny if we all just left now and just left Tom in the room on his own.
Yeah. No. So I guess get me up to speed on what we've been doing here so far.
Well, we're up to your questions.
Oh, are we? Cool. Maybe I'll, I have a few notes here. I focused mostly on Armored Skeptic's response, actually, just because I tend to think he's one of the people out of the Rationals TM who's actually probably most willing to change his views on these sort of things. And so, I thought a lot of what he said wasn't really that objectionable per se. So, I mean, I had a few things here. Let's see. Well, first of all, he opened, and I mean, if you've said any of this, just feel free to let me know. But he said when he first opened the video, like, this video by Kristi Winters, where referring to, you addressing the questions white men have for SJW's video directly, he said she and some other people who I guess identify as social justice warriors. And that was interesting to me because it's like, since when is SJW a self-applied identity? Because do you know anybody who would actually refer to themselves as a social justice warrior? Because I haven't found them.
No.
Yeah. All right, good. We have a consensus on that. And let's see. I'll go to this point. He said a few things in the span of a few seconds at one point when he said, I think he was responding to one of Tim's questions. He said, like, I personally am anti-social justice and anti-feminism because I've noticed that those groups have become quite idealistic, which I thought jarred with the fact that he's always like, oh, I'm not an anti-feminist. I'm just a skeptic of any and all claims. And I was like, well, pick one. And then later he was like, I don't identify as an anti-SJW or an anti-feminist because I feel those are meaningless terms. And it's like, well, what did you just say? And then later he says that he's not against social justice as a whole or feminism as a whole. And it's like, whoa, these were all like sentences that came like one after another in the same answer to these questions. And I got, it was utterly confusing. And let's see. When Tim asked, like, why do you have an aversion to being labeled right wing? He said that the reason we have an aversion to being called right wing is because we're not. And I was like, well, I mean, I think in reference to the group that Skeptic is in, I think that's fairly accurate. A lot of them are pretty, like, they're, I guess you could call them liberal. I mean, you guys are probably a different kind of liberal from them, I would assume, but I feel like he was kind of discounting the fact that there's a lot of right-wing anti-SJWs. And I mean, he did talk about that, but like, you know, Stefan Molyneux, that guy T, Edgy Sphick, do these people, does he not want to acknowledge them? Or does he just he doesn't want to acknowledge that they're in the same camp to some extent or not? Any thoughts on that, anybody?
I
It's tough,
think
I know.
they often said in the answers that you're trying to apply right wing to us. You're trying to make us right wing. And I guess, like, if somebody comes to me and says, you're a cultural Marxist, that doesn't make sense to me unless you're right wing. Like, that's Nazi terminology. Why would a left wing person use that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I just don't even get that. Like, so if you say, oh, you cultural Marxist, by the way, I'm a left winger, I just sit there and go, I don't understand you.
Yeah, that's you just like the whole.
Yeah, not just that, but people who claim to be left wing and have backed Donald Trump. Ridiculous.
Oh yeah. Now let's see. And then when he answered my first question, which was the thing about Bleach, he said something that I thought was pretty admirable. He just said, I wouldn't have put Anthony Fantano's Bleach question in my own video, but that wasn't really my choice. And I was just like, well, okay. I mean, I guess that makes sense. To be fair, I think this is one of the good things about Skeptic is that he's not telling people to, like, he didn't do the Kraut and Teeth thing where he just insulted the person to their face and just walked away like he did to Steve Shives, which I thought was, like, you know, good on you, Greg. Let's see. And then there was...
why, can I just say also that's why,
Yeah.
as the editor and producer, I circulated versions and got people's feedback because I wanted everybody to know what was in the video before it went out. And if anyone had an objection or wanted to give input, then that opportunity was given before your name was attached to it.
Yeah, I think that was important because I know privately, having talked to one of the people involved in the original white men questions white men have for SJWs, they really were not happy to be associated with AIU, but they didn't know that he was involved with the thing at all.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a completely understandable reaction to being featured alongside that guy. So I completely understand that. Skeptic said one thing that I kind of want to, I don't know, fact check, I guess, since, I mean, you would probably be the relevant people to ask this to. He said at some point that the term third wave feminist was coined by Naomi Wolf, but I was pretty sure it was Rebecca Walker. Can anybody, like, clarify? Does that term have an origin?
I've heard Walker too. I could literally just put it on, you know, the Google machine right now if you want.
Yeah, because I saw, because Rebecca Walker wrote that article in Ms. Magazine called Becoming the Third Wave, and I'm pretty sure that's where it started. Not that that's really too much of, like, a dig against Greg, like, oh, he can't even do his own research, but, like, I mean, that was just something that was interesting. I wasn't sure about that myself. Let's see. And then, my next question about, like, why do you seem less concerned with like actual feminist theory and stuff as you are with wrecking people for views? He said he doesn't do academic papers because he's dyslexic, and he leaves that to Thunderfoot and Sargon, who do a much better job of that than he could, because as we all know, Sargon's so good at reading studies.
Oh God.
He's so good. He's the best. And then he said, let's see, he said, my job is to deal with the practical application of feminism as we see it online and in society. And I was like, well, does that mean that you're taking a look at, like, feminist activism generally, or are you just looking at, like, crazy people? You know, because I think a lot of what they do is just, like, looking at, oh, look at this person, look what they do. But, like, you know, you could always talk about, like, I feel like they only ever bring the actual feminist activism up when they're talking about the people who they think are bad. Like, you know, all the people who are raising money to end female genital mutilation in the Middle East and all that, they only really ever bring them up when they're trying to lessen the importance of Black Lives Matter activism and, you know, similar first world activism. which I guess could all tie back to that same relative privation fallacy that they love to pull out a lot.
Oh, also, by the way, I do have an answer on the question. After trying a couple different sources, I came back to Wiki because it was the best source. And it says here that Rebecca Walker published an article entitled Becoming the Third Wave, in which she stated, "I am not a post-feminism feminist, I am the third wave."
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be where the term originated, and the citation is from 1992.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right to me. That's about what I could gather as well. So now we know we're all a little bit smarter thanks to Google. Let's see. And his other point about academics was he said academics don't make a lot of YouTube videos, so it's hard to make YouTube debunking videos to the things they say. And I mean, I don't really think that's stopped a lot of people before, Sargon again. I hate to repeat myself, but then I think he said something like, the quote I wrote down is, "It's easy to see how Anita Sarkeesian is directly affecting society." And I think he was saying that, like, compared to feminist academics, it's like, the feminist theory isn't as hard to isn't as easy to see, like, how it's affecting the world. But somebody like Anita Sarkeesian is very obviously having an effect on the world, apparently, by talking about video games. I don't know. Get back to me on that one. But
my face is twitching right now.
Me too. Don't worry. It's fine. And let's see. Did you guys talk about any of the answers to Steve Shives' question about second wave feminists? Like, which second wave feminists do you specifically admire?
Well, last night the guys had really only had time to look at some of the responses to their own questions. They didn't go through others. Kristi City has done a few, but I think it was more general. So we haven't talked about Armored Skeptic, and in particular, I don't think yet.
I just thought I would do, and I mean, I did not like.
No, that's fine. I like your close reading. Yeah. We call this a close reading.
Yeah. I don't know how close it is. I mean, I did look for his answers to my questions, but I skipped around and looked at other people's who I thought, I could have something to say about. But when Steve asked which second wave feminists do you specifically admire, he put in like angelic vocals and faded in a picture of Christina Hoff Sommers from the bottom of the video. And I was like, well, I knew somebody was going to say that. I was expecting more answers. Like, I don't know. I think Steve said that he was expecting a certain answer to come up a lot, but I was expecting Christina Hoff Sommers to come up a lot. And that was interesting to me because I don't think she identifies as a second waver. She usually says that, like, her whole thing is equity feminism, which is
she's an equity.
Yeah. She was like, I was reading in a few places, and she says that, like, I don't know, her brand of feminism kind of harkens back to like equal rights and equal opportunities for women, like in the style of the first wave as opposed to the second.
That's how backward she is. The second wave is far too progressive for her.
Exactly. And I have a quote from her here because, like, she's made public the fact that she disagrees with some second waivers on some things. Like, this is a quote from her. You probably heard it. "The perspective now from my point of view is that the better things get for women, the angrier the women's studies professors seem to be, the more depressed Gloria Steinem seems to get." And she's like, as far as I know, Gloria Steinem, like, is the second wave. Like, she's a big part of the second wave. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
If I could trump this, I have heard it said, it's a lot of people are saying that when Christina Hoff Sommers does a public talk, she won't do a Q&A afterwards. And if that is the case, and that's what I'm hearing, a lot of people are saying this, then it would be interesting to see what the people who advocate free speech and all that and blocking would have to say about that policy.
Yeah. So that was.
Oh my God, she's the Steve Shives of whatever she is.
The Steve Shives of whatever.
I was going to say I expected a few more people to maybe mention Camille Paglia as another.
I did see some.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw her once or twice pop up, but I thought she would be mainly because she's essentially an anti-feminist, like Christina Hoff Sommers, basically.
Mm-hmm. The one who I think Steve mentioned that he thought was going to come up a lot was that woman who opened up a domestic abuse shelter.
Erin Pitzer.
Yeah. The domestic abuse shelter for men, and then apparently feminists shut it down. I don't know much about that situation myself.
She's a really fascinating example of the only MRA I've ever seen do any activism whatsoever in the real world, but is also still a massive dickhead.
Yeah.
Just point out that feminism as a movement has been going since the 19th century, and in all that time, you know, we talk about the 60s. Let's talk about second wave since the 1960s, and in the last 50 years, these people can come up with maybe 4 people.
Yeah.
No.
That doesn't speak well to their knowledge, does it?
And also, I think the bigger point with Steve's question about which second wave do you admire is that actually this is a point I've sort of touched on in previous hangouts, is that these people don't actually give a fuck. It's basically in the same way that racists today will invoke the memory of Martin Luther King because he's yesterday's hero. He's not a threat to their narrative today, so they can happily accept him as a shield and say, okay, well, I support the feminism of bygone eras, or I can accept the race politics of bygone eras, because they're not a direct threat to your status quo today. Because obviously they can't be. Most of those people are dead and are not, part of the political establishment or anything like that. And that's why they do that. And I think Steve quite cleverly got under the people's skin with that.
And if I could say, at least about Christina Hoff Sommers, instead of, again, focusing on the solutions to the problem, she seems to profit from perpetuating the division.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of talking about, men and boys issues in a way that tries to take things forward, she does it in a way that tries to make men look out like the victims and women look like the perpetrators.
Which is ironic, given that she's best friends with Milo Yiannopoulos, a man who defends Catholic priest predator pedophiles.
Yeah, and generally just a very nasty human being to other human beings.
Yeah,
the whole situation's just gone to shit.
Yeah.
The right is eating itself, guys. Let's see.
Well, I got into, speaking of sort of the right, I got into an argument with someone on your comment section.
Oh yeah.
Not yours, Kristi's actually. I'm sorry. Yeah, I gave up on your comment section. Oh my god.
Yeah, mine. It's probably because I'm like more left than the rest of you guys, so I get people who are further right than what you guys are even used to. It's a weird horseshoe.
I had gotten sort of. So somebody was saying, well, I like Christina Hoff Sommers, but I don't like people who don't criticize the Middle East enough or aren't involved in the Middle East. And I said, well, Christina Hoff Sommers gets a lot of her money from oil billionaires who have contracts in Saudi Arabia and these other places. So, you would think that she would be even more somebody you don't like because, sure, some campus feminist might not be talking about, Muslims in the way that you would like them to, but at least they're not paying for her swimming pool. And the absolute denial, like, well, what are you talking about? Like, well, no, this is where her paycheck comes from. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's.
I think that there have always been women who have done well from being anti-feminist. And we see it today. I think the honey badgers situation is obviously another example of that. And yeah, I think there's always been a market for a woman who's willing to speak out. And basically, and she has been called anti-feminist by other women who do self-identify as feminists and not equity feminists, in that sort of I'm my own kind of feminist kind of way.
Yeah, she can call herself a feminist if she wants to. I don't really care, but it's just I don't understand somebody who says I don't like feminism because it isn't dealing with the Middle East, but I do like this one feminist who gets her money from from all these sort of tied in with the Middle East. Like, what is she doing that you like? Is she helping the people in the Middle East in some way? Because I'm not seeing it. She's just telling other people that they're not doing that. So
I'm only aware of her going after Western feminism.
Yeah, her feminism seems to be just attacking other people's feminism. It doesn't seem very productive.
So maybe they should ask her. I would like them to ask her what she's doing with the Middle East. If she's going to be a feminist, she needs to answer for Valerie Solanas. She needs to answer what she's doing in the Middle East and to help people in the Middle East, and why the hell she's not doing more. That's what I need her to answer for me.
Yeah.
Then she gets to be a feminist.
Yeah, then
Gosh,
then all of the privileged, yes, the white guys who get to decide what a feminist is, then you've ticked all their boxes and you get to be a real feminist.
Oh, we're so reasonable. The reasonables TM.
So yeah, do you want to go on with the next point that you wanted to?
Yeah, the last point that I had about Skeptic's video was like my question that kind of ended the thing, where I just put Sargon's question back in their faces. The way he answered it was just to play the oh my god clip from Troll 2. So at least, I mean, he could at least understand that, like, you know, it was a joke and he didn't try and give it like an actual answer, which I was like, okay, that's probably better than an answer at all. Like, his non-response was probably better than in TJ's video when he said, like, well, it made more sense when we asked it to you, and that was just his whole answer, and he didn't like assert why, other than just like, yeah, you guys are the emotionally mature ones.
Yeah, I think that sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, I think you hit upon a really interesting part of the way I viewed these responses, is to try and see the relative intelligences of the people involved by whether the individual questions being asked were sort of jokey or required a serious answer. And if they gave a serious answer to a joke, my estimation of their intelligence went down very significantly.
Yeah. Like when TJ answered, what is it with you people in skulls? He was just like, skulls are cool. And that was it.
Yeah, exactly. Like that required a fucking answer, you idiot.
Yeah. I mean,
at least, you know, that's kind of funny back.
Yeah. I mean, now we know TJ thinks skulls are cool. Maybe they'll start showing up in his videos too. It's just going to be skulls everywhere for the rest of time.
So Tom, do you want to talk about your mirroring? And because you were the one that was linked to a couple different main response videos, and what that was like in terms of the reactions of the different comments.
Surely. I will pull up really quickly just I'm going to get to my mirror of the video on YouTube, but I'm just going to talk while I do it. It was interesting that, like, I'm not really sure why everybody thought, like, my video, a lot of people, like you said, linked to my video as the mirror of, I don't know, whatever you said. That was just word salad. But I think Armored Skeptic screenshotted my mirror and asked me on Twitter, like, oh, apparently asking questions is poning now, and added me and no one else. Some people have tweeted me their responses just in a tweet to me, just adding me. It's at 5,016 views now. What? Let's see. But I will say the like-dislike ratio is like almost directly in the middle. 336 likes to 395 dislikes. And I think really the reason everybody, maybe not the reason everybody, but the reason a few people linked to it is probably because I think I had the idea for the video in the first place. So maybe that was just their logical thing, was to be like, oh, well, he must be. But, like, you know, that kind of leaves out the work that not only Kristi did, but the work that everybody else put into that video to make it what it is. And, you know.
Well, that's why I was glad no one linked to mine, because that would have been absurd.
Well, yeah. Let's see. People just keep linking me their responses in the comments, and they keep getting marked as spam because there's a link in them, and I don't know how many of them I want to, like, check off or not.
For mine, I put them all up because it was one of the original videos. But yeah, I kind of have to check because sometimes people just put random crap as a response in there as well, so you have to go through them. I'm just going on mine because if you wanted to know, I actually have to go on the video to see the likes to dislikes ratio. But yeah, I've got like 2,700 dislikes and like getting on 700 likes and 28,000 change. So yeah, we got a lot of eyeballs, I guess.
Yeah.
I got a lot of horrible comments. Some okay comments, but I've kind of been filtering that the comments more than kind of really, well, I've gone through and I've actually collected all of the people who took the time to go through all the questions, but I haven't been like pouring over them and responding one by one.
Well, what I wanted to ask, well, I suppose it applies to both Tom and Kristi, given that you've been linked to a number of these responses and by relatively big, people. Who would you suggest has the worst fan base, given the different waves of hate that have been pouring your way?
Just from this, or from
like I say, like you've been given. Like I know it's the Honey Badgers linked your one, and everyone had a linked back to one of the originals. Yeah. And so presumably you've had those waves of fans coming over. Who would you suggest is probably the worst? Or
the Honey Badgers had some very interesting people.
Interesting.
TJ, I don't know if he linked to me or not, but I got a bunch of his fans, and I got a bunch of who is it? Dr. Randomer Cam, I guess.
Oh, him.
Yeah.
So all that I got from them though really was, oh, you've been pwned, you've been wrecked, you've been destroyed, and it's like, okay, I'm sure that is what happened. So,
well, I wouldn't take that too harshly, considering their version of activism involves getting their fans to buy them a house.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Did any of you guys get like comments that actually went through and answered every single question in like the longest screed you've ever written?
Yeah,
dozens.
Yeah.
I get those all the time.
Yeah, and by the way, just to everyone watching, I don't read those. If you can't, either make a fucking response video or keep it down to reasonable length.
And if you're gonna make a response video, then be concise with it. I don't mean to sound like Sargon. Like, can you not summarize this in under 5? Like, if you have to make a long response, I understand. But I mean,
yeah, but try and keep it to under 6 Sargons if you can.
yeah, exactly. Armored Skeptics ran on for about 56 minutes, which was okay. I did appreciate that TJ broke it up into 3 videos. Although that was kind of a sign of doom that like the first part was 20 minutes and it said part 1 of 3. And I just went, oh God, we're going to have to listen to like more of this. Cause to me, his response wasn't the brightest at times. Which is why I didn't really focus on it too much. Cause like, I think, Martin Hughes wrote a really great blog post about that. So he said a lot of the things that, I would have said, but just better. I decided to, focus more on the responses that I thought were a bit more redeemable, which is why I mostly focused on, Armored Skeptics. But I did have one guy in particular that I wanted to talk about. He's not really like a big name YouTuber. He just kind of makes videos. Guy's YouTube channel is QNTKKA. Did any of you get tweets from him or anything?
Yeah, Quintica. I know him. He's
Quintica.
Yeah, he's an anti-feminist dude, but he's actually not the worst at all.
I mean, yeah, he said in his response, I didn't watch too much of it for reasons I'll explain in a second, but he said at some point, I think that he's like a left liberal, which, okay. But
yeah, I've done a few hangouts with him. He's certainly centrist at the very worst, really.
Yeah, but I mean, he tweeted me his response to our questions with, let's see. It's he gave me the link and said, @Tomavella, here are your answers, runt. He called me a runt, and I tweeted back at him, like, evaluate yourself here for a second. Do you really think that calling me a runt is going to entice me to hear what you have to say on this? And he just tweeted me back the word yes.
Are we sure that wasn't a misspelling?
No, because he said it to me about 3 more times. So I think it was very deliberate. Classic Quintica. Thank you. I know I pronounced his name. I'm an idiot.
I've revised my opinion. He's a bit of a twat.
Well, yeah. And then I only watched maybe about 3 minutes. I mean, partly because, I'm a full-time college student. I don't really have much time to watch all these responses, and partly because of some things he said in it. So I had just like 2 points of his. Like he says at some point, back on the demotivator's question about right wing, he said, I would define right wing as being a set of political beliefs that exist in opposition to the left wing, which is viewed as normal. And I had a few problems with that. So I think, first of all, like, if you've adopted a series of beliefs specifically to get back at people with different beliefs, then what are you standing on other than just opposition to something? Like, that's my problem with like defining right wing as being like, oh, right wing is just a set of beliefs that are against the left wing. So like,
well then, but the problem with that is you can then do the reverse, and then basically it's entirely meaningless.
Mm-hmm. Like it's like how I always view the men's rights movement as existing just in opposition to feminism, which I think is a pretty valid.
That's just
like, they would have no talk about men's issues if there weren't feminists talking about women's issues. Like, that's how I view it. And then he said it exists in opposition to the left wing, which is viewed as normal. And like, well, who are you saying views the left as normal? Is that like, that's kind of weasel wordy without actually using weasel words. It seems like kind of a baseless assertion. And Skeptic said that too. He's like, the lefter who has the most influence right now in academia and in the media and in government. And I don't know how keen I am on that as somebody who is very left. I do not see the left represented in.
Yeah, I would suggest
that much.
All of the corporate media are owned by neoliberals, so I really don't see that the left is dominant in that respect at all.
Oh, but neoliberal has the word liberal in it, so they have to be left.
Well, like classical liberal. I mean, to me, that's the stupidest thing Sargon ever said. I'm on the left. I'm classical liberal. When Edgy Sphinx did my response to episode 4 of my Buzzword series, which was about liberalism, I mentioned in that video that classical liberalism was kind of co-opted by right-wingers, and I kind of faded in a little like faded image of Sargon of Akkad and took it away. And Edgy Sphinx really railed on me for that. I think it's like, oh, you really think he's right-wing? And I mean, just because Edgy Sphinx is further to the right than Sargon, I don't think that means that, like, because if you look at classical liberalism, it is very similar in spirit to right-wing libertarianism nowadays. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but a lot of the same spirit is there. And a lot of those people are more socially progressive, but their politics are very, specifically right-wing or center-right or whatever you want to say. I have a hard time viewing Sargon as anything other than just like an enigma, like his politics are a very strange mix of like, right-wing libertarianism and progressivism and a few other things. It's very difficult to pin him down, but I wouldn't pin him on the left. Well, I like the phrase brocialist.
Yeah.
There is a book, I think the author is Zaller, and it's about like forming public opinions. And one of the premises or the theses of the book is that for people who, let's call them low information voters, when you ask them questions, they just kind of, it's not that they generate random answers, but they don't think about how all of their politics hang together. They don't have a core ideology that informs when they come to an issue that they draw on to inform it. They kind of have a gut reaction, and then they decide on it, and they stick that on a tree of other things that they think, if that kind of makes sense. He didn't say the thing about the tree. I said the thing about the tree, but it just kind of made sense to sort of separate it out. So just to say, Zaller never said anything about hanging ideas in a tree. But that might explain a little bit about why his views tend to be a bit random, because they don't come from a coherent, sort of well thought out process and ideology. He just kind of goes with whatever the mood is at the time or what's popular.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that you said the tree.
That is a Kristi Winters original.
Thank you.
All right. So
Can
that
I
was
throw something in here completely unrelated? Because I just realized I said something that could easily have been taken out of context when I talked about cultural Marxism being from Nazis. So I don't see why a left-wing person would use that. I wasn't trying to say that right-wingers are Nazis. Like, that's the same thing, but...
I am. I'm definitely saying that.
Oh, yeah.
So,
like,
my impression of it was, why would you use a term used by fascists if that was my impression of your...
That was... They had a very right-wing ideology, so...
Yeah. No, they were the National Socialist German Workers' Party, guys. Come on.
Exactly, and we all know that tiny mustaches equals left wing.
Thanks, Steven Crowder.
Oh,
So,
that guy can
and-
go fuck himself.
Oh man.
Very quickly, just to answer Kevin's earlier question. So I just checked, and there are, in terms of the numbers of comments on my version of the video, it's at 2725. I have not read all of the comments, and I've been a little bit too overwhelmed to see the waves. So what helps me is to know what a person says in their video, because a lot of times their fans will just come and echo rather than watch the video. They'll just come and write comments, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
time watched plummets when you have these big videos. So I'm not au fait enough with everybody's individual responses to me to have seen the waves. But unlike the people who've gone before, just to be, well, one, it's more convenient for me, and two, to do something different. For the people who took the time to write out their responses, I actually went and collected as many as I could, like on an evening Thursday, and it ended up being 36 pages. I think the Word document was in length. But my plan is to go through those, and for those people, party car going by, those people who wrote out a response to me, I'm going to collect those and thematize them and see if there are some common responses, and then that's what I'm going to do in my head.
Christy, can I just give you a piece of advice? Next time you get a Thursday night off, just go and get really drunk instead.
I should.
Probably. It's a much better use of anyone's time.
Well, we had so many people saying, "Are you guys going to do a response? Are you going to do a response?" And also a lot of, I'm going to just say it, come across a lot of people feeling entitled, like to me sitting down and watching their response video to me, not really understanding that there are at least 40, probably now closer to 50 or 60 response videos and all the comments to go through. So I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to address everybody's video individually, but there's just too much, and we're making a sincere effort.
Are you suggesting that anti-feminist white dudes are entitled? Because I mean, I've never seen that. I don't
Oh,
know.
never.
No sense of entitlement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I made something, watch it.
Not just that,
Watch
but
it. Watch it now. Watch it now, runt.
I like exactly. I love when they do that. Like, I fucking wrecked you, you prick. Go and watch it. Oh yeah, well I'll definitely watch it now. Thanks. Yeah.
And then later, Quintica actually tweeted at me at Tomavella, "Hey runt, why ask questions if you don't want the answers? Hashtag SJW. Hashtag cowards."
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of entitlement that I'm talking about.
Yeah. I got a lot of it's one thing if you've asked me nicely to watch your video and then I didn't, and then you're being a dick about it. But if you're coming out and saying you're too much of a coward to ever watch this video, like what?
I especially love the ones that will wait like fucking 20 minutes and then be like, "You still haven't watched my video." Yeah, it was an hour ago. What the fuck? What do you expect me to do?
Yeah.
So
Let's see. The last thing I wanted to say about Quintica is that I got as far as his response to Philip Moriarty's question about like reconciling evidence-based worldviews with like the whole "I was just shitposting" culture of Twitter. And so what happened was Quintica opened his response. So he says, "How do you reconcile, oh, I'm evidence-based and I'm logic-based with, oh, I was just trolling, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?" And the first thing Quintica says is, "People on the autism spectrum, what the fuck are you talking about?" Like, I was like, oh, this is gonna be hell irrational.
That was exactly that. That's like some beautiful nonsense poetry or something.
That is art in the purest form. But like wow. And what wound up happening was that Philip Moriarty was diagnosed by Quintica. He armchair diagnosed Philip with autism because apparently he can't tell the difference between a lie and a truth. A lie being a joke and a truth being truth. I don't know.
What I don't get is with YouTube, right? YouTubers basically should have put out the psychiatry industry out of business, because you don't need to get training and go through years of doing a degree. You can just rock up and say, "Oh yeah, this fucker's autistic." Yep, job done. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello?
Well, anything else, Tom, about like the comments from your video, or
I'm gonna
any other interactions? If you don't have any, that's okay. I just don't want to skip over you before.
I'll probably, let's see, let's sort them by like most recent, because I do read them as they come sometimes. Like, let's see. People, mostly just people telling me I got wrecked by like everyone that the video addresses and shit. Like,
And how do you wrecked a question? Like,
exactly.
how do you I kept saying it's not their questions. It's like they shouldn't be destroyed. They should be answered. That's what.
Yeah,
yeah. not just that, but please spell it properly for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
R-E-K-T. We're not 10-year-olds.
Yeah. And then what was it? 3 days ago, Noel Plum actually posted his response. He said, "It was your idea, eh? Well done for the idea. Out of courtesy, I'm informing you that I made a response, and here's the link. If you choose to watch the video, could I take this opportunity to advise you to drink something other than bleach or any similar potentially corrosive substance while listening to my seemingly endless rambling?" And I haven't gotten around to it, but at least he was like, "Yeah, don't drink bleach. Just drink something like bleach."
I think that shows the level of scumbaggery on the quote unquote opposite side. Given that it's a point in their favor that they didn't ask you to drink bleach.
Yeah, it's just like they just have to. Yeah, they just have to be a decent person.
You know, Noel and I don't often see eye to eye, but I wanted to say that seemed like he was trying to actually make a decent, gesture in that one, and good on him for that.
Yeah, let's see. Some of the like profiles these guys make on here.
He's done 2 videos now that I've seen. And I think he engaged the most that I've seen anybody engaged with Steve Ives questions. So for that alone, just throwing that out there.
He's not the worst. I disagree with him on a great deal of stuff, but he's by no means the worst.
Yeah, there's much. Surprisingly, it goes much further down. Like somebody called Drink Bleach Every Day left an interesting nugget. He says, let's just take this like piece by piece. I
love how logical these people are. It's glorious.
Oh yeah. This is rational discourse at its finest. He says, there's no solid left or right wing. There's the authoritarian left, in parentheses, you guys, the authoritarian right, Fox affiliates and the elderly, and the most popular shitlords on YouTube are made up half of libertarian liberals and libertarian liberals.
I love the fact that we're supposed to be not doing, lumping people together, and he's just said the elderly.
Yeah,
all of the elderly.
Jesus Christ, talk to Noam Chomsky, man. Come on. But like the whole libertarian liberals, that is to me like as someone who's a left libertarian, that is just like infuriating to me. Libertarian liberals.
Libertarian liberal is a philosophical farce.
Yeah. As is libertarian Republican, as he said. Let's see. Libertarians of either wing are brought together by their shared hatred of authoritarians, and authoritarian Republicans hate you because you're their reverse image.
There are perfectly reasonable responses to that you could just want to go, oh, fuck off. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and let's see. I myself am a Green Party liberal and side against SJWs. Interesting that Green Party, I mean, to me, the Green Party seems like they would be like perfect candidates for being called SJWs, especially with their whole like anti-science quackery and all that nonsense. But that's just kind of an interesting thing. Let's see. I used to be one of you in the early 90s. Incidentally, I am a woman, and the drink bleach thing is actually a sort of meme response to cringe videos. Well, I mean, yeah, I get that, but it's still not very nice, is it?
Yeah, so in terms of like the responses to our response, I mean, I think when we did when I edited and took really too long to do our 3-part response to their very loaded questions, skewed questions, monologuing questions, a lot of people in those responses took time to sincerely engage with the question and unpack it and give an answer. And how many people do you think met that effort? From the sounds of it, like you said, Noel Plum was the closest that you thought they got to.
With Steve, I thought Infidel Emma and Positive Improvements. And these are some smaller channels, but these were, I I'm thinking of someone, I think his name is Mim Hedrum, Insensitive Bastard,
Oh yeah.
and Stacy King.
Hmm.
I thought they all sort of took it pretty seriously and sort of really engaged with the ideas and had their own ideas and came back and were sort of yeah, you know, they were cogent and logical arguments in there that you could look at and say, yeah, I get where what you're saying, and you know, I might disagree with you or might not, but I can totally understand the argument. It's related to the question, which is good. You know, so that sort of thing.
So we did a little shout out to responses to our questions in our own responses video or hangout.
Yeah.
So people should go watch those for better responses.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, well, some of the people who are bigger YouTubers said in no small way that they are entertainers and they're there to sort of entertain people, and so that does make it a little more difficult to sort of parse, well, when are you doing the entertaining part and when is the points, you know? So
Well,
put up a sign.
Yeah, it's a sort of Schrodinger's douchebag situation where
Yeah.
they'll push it as far as they can, and then when they get called, it's a joke, it's satire, I'm an entertainer.
Yeah. That was the problem I had with Kraut and T, like his parts in the Amazing Atheist response and also his live stream response to it with a bunch of other people, was that when he got around specifically to like H-bombs questions, which, you know, a lot of them were just kind of jokes to keep the video entertaining, but like at one point Kraut was just like, why should I take this guy seriously? I mean, just look at his channel, look at these video titles. And it's like, well, he's an entertainer. Why are you why are you in the same video? TJ's like, oh, we're entertainers, you know, like and then Kraut later is just like, oh, look at this guy trying to be entertaining.
Krauts, I thought, were among the worst.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
I've been very nice.
No question.
Everyone can see that I've been nice and charitable, but they were just terrible. Most of them had nothing to do with the question. He just babbled about how horrible Islam is, how none of us understand what it's like living in Germany right now because of Islam. And when we mentioned, you know, like I said, well, Kristi, he said he didn't really believe she lived in Germany. Like, this is a very strange thing. No, you know, it's like, yeah, I doubt that. Like, why would she lie about that? Like, of all the strange things,
you know,
randomly,
you can look up the fact that she works at the place she claims to work at.
Yeah, I mean,
in Germany.
I'm a figure, you know, my papers are out there. My stuff is out there. It's pretty
Yeah, but you don't do videos dressed in lederhosen, so it can't be real.
Right. Yeah.
So
the whole series about the Christmas markets in Cologne. That's just, you know, I was just a tourist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of, if you're going to bother to answer the questions, then just answer the questions, man. Why are you having this freak out about how we don't understand
and
what it's like in Cologne? You know, like, I don't live in Cologne.
Something just struck me. There's far more evidence that Kristi lives in Germany than Kraut lives in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He could be from fucking anywhere. He could be an Englishman putting that accent on. I don't know where he's from.
Yeah, I actually thought the first time I heard his voice, I thought that he was English, but then I was like, oh wait, he is.
So I'm just saying, if we're gonna doubt, I've not seen any credentials that he's from Germany.
Yeah, and I actually linked to his Hangout on my Twitter as it was going on, and it was just like I linked it, and then I was just like, why won't you guys shut up about Islam? Why do you keep talking about this? It's like, shut up. Like, that was my only. That was my gut response.
Question about Islam. One. And, you know, so that, and if you're saying, like I said, if you're saying, I don't really care about this because Islam is a much bigger problem, fine, then what the fuck are you asked? You know, why would you even bother to load this up? What are you doing? Just so that you can yell about Islam when nobody's talking about that?
I need to make a video about like the whole Islam thing at some point, because I think, I mean, there's like they might be right about like some of the their points about the discourse on Islam, like, oh, people are always making apologies for Islam, and then the other people who, I mean, Majid Nawaz was right to a point when he actually defined the term regressive left as like people who make apologies for illiberal things, because there are definitely people who are like, no, Islam's a religion, but as somebody who's like, I'm not sure that there really is a religion of peace out there at all. So like, why are you so set on like, Islam being the one religion that's like the worst? I mean, yeah, they're probably the most vocal about, like, they probably have the most profiled terror acts out of any religious group since modern media became a thing. But what makes you think that other religions don't have the same things written into their doctrines? Are you just willing to go over that because they're not? I don't know. I'm not. This is just kind of like my whole 2 cents on the issue as somebody who isn't really 100% informed.
And also, can I just say, as someone who lives in Cologne, and also and being in Germany, I've done a video on
Prove it.
Islam.
Allegedly.
And there are laws against hate speech in Germany and inciting people to, or saying things that are very abusive and violent and dehumanizing, I think is the term, to people based on their religious beliefs, for instance. But I show my face. And so I think you can critique Islam without having any concerns about hate speech if you do it based on reason and evidence and appealing to, humanism and other humanist principles. Now, I don't understand why he feels the need to hide if he's not saying anything that could be deemed hate speech.
Because he doesn't think hate speech exists. Like, that's I'm sure he would employ the Steven Crowder defensive. Like, oh, if somebody says something and you don't like it, you don't get to call it hate speech. I think that's a direct Steven Crowder quote from the Triggering at UMass.
Right, but you can do a decent critique without having to say anything even close to hate speech.
Yeah, definitely.
That's my point.
And people
he
have.
should be able to make his arguments and put his face to it and say, these are my objections, these are my concerns, and present it in a way that wouldn't cross any lines.
Well, clearly he is, if he believes the things that he's saying, he's kind of crazy. He's I mean.
Yeah, he does seem very Alex Jonesy about the whole Islam thing.
He is acting like they're at his door. Like they're hiding under his bushes. They're right there. Like, we're all going to be attacked. Western culture is going down in smoke, even. Like, so I don't know. So his was another thing that I saw a lot that was terrible. There was a lot of that to coke fallacy, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong.
To quote,
yeah. But it's just I know what. Yeah. Now I can't speak. Now I can't speak Latin and I can't speak. But it's all that. Nah, you. It's you.
Yeah.
SJWs do that, not us. We don't do that.
That's TJ. That was TJ's favorite.
And just over and over again. And it's like, look, that's a fallacy. Cut it up. Just stop it. Just, you know why it's a fallacy? Because, the pot that called the kettle black was right. That's why it's a fallacy. So shut the fuck up about it, all right? So let's go.
But he's logic on his t-shirt.
Buy things for your puppy, barkbox.com.
So that's just me because I had to sit through. Well, I didn't have to. I chose to sit through many videos and read through many of these things. Yeah. And if I saw one more, I was going to beat somebody over the head with it,
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think then we've probably come to the end. It's been a long, strange journey, but we got there in the end. Yeah, any last final comments or thoughts from any of the participants?
Just make sure to join Against the Odds, the Facebook group. Yeah, and I'm very happy to see you there.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kevin, for joining us. Sorry again for the background noise. And also, Tom, it was worth the wait. It was great to hear your thoughts and your close reading of the I'm a Skeptic video. We hadn't had sort of that depth of a focus on Wendy video. So I'm good. I know that people in the comments will be happy because that's one of the things they complained about in the last one. So thank you guys for joining me. And for those of you watching, I've been Kristi, and it's been Cece and Kevin and Tom. We've all been really happy to have you. You guys have been awesome. And we'll be finishing this up in part 3, and that will come out on a very spontaneous nature sometime next week. So see you guys later. Bye.